Chapter 1096. Niao Yang seemed to want to laugh, but because his movements were too big he accidentally choked. The smile that had just risen froze at the corner of his lips. "You're really straightforward." Niao Yang took a breath and looked at Wei Ci with a faint smile. "I thought that Zixiao and your brother's temperament is similar, but now that I see it I've misjudged you. Aren't you afraid of hurting yourself by saying this to me?" Wei Ci opened his thin lips. "Mr. Nia, please open your mouth. Your tongue is thick and has a different color. Are there any differences when you eat or drink tea?" Niao Yang looked straight at Wei Ci's face. Whatever the other person instructed, he would do as he was told, acting like a well-behaved patient who was highly cooperative with the doctor. "Differences? Yes. Occasionally you can't taste it or the tip of your tongue is slow. Something that is obviously bitter, but it doesn't taste as bitter as I remember." The process of looking, listening, questioning and feeling the pulse, every move was smooth and pleasing to the eye. If he did not know Wei Ci's identity, Niao Yang would have suspected that Wei Ci was a reclusive and virtuous doctor. You discovered it in time. If you carefully dispel the poison except for a weak body, your life will not be in danger. Remember not to overwork or waste too much energy. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll die young. Wei Ci said, "I can see that Big Brother regards Mr. Nia as a confidant. According to Big Brother's temperament, if something happens to Mr. Nia under his watch, he'll probably be depressed for the rest of his life." Niao Yang wanted to laugh bitterly. Living in troubled times, every day alive was a day earned. How many years was there between dying young and dying of old age? Niao Yang's identity meant that he could not stay out of the struggle. He discovered it in time this time, but could he escape a second time? However, he never expected Wei Ci to mention Wei Dan. A trace of astonishment flashed in Niao Yang's eyes, as if he did not expect that the reason Wei Ci was willing to help was for Wei Dan. There are many heroes in the world and it can be said that there are many bright stars, but there is only one Niao Yang in the world. Wei Ci smiled lightly, his overly delicate and colorful face instantly became lively, like 100 flowers blooming. "Of course Mr. Nia only has one life." Niao Yang was about to speak, but his sharp ears heard Wei Dan's footsteps and he quickly stopped. "Zixiao, the prescriptions are all here." Wei Dan took out several prescriptions. Some were in the form of bamboo slips, while others were folded bamboo paper. They were all well preserved. Wei Ci took it and looked at it closely. His brows were sometimes furrowed and sometimes relaxed, making Wei Ci's heart beat wildly. "There's no problem with these prescriptions. Whether it's the herbs or the measurements, they're all good for treating colds." After Wei Ci looked at them, he arranged them neatly and returned them to their original positions. "However, you must prescribe the right medicine to treat the illness. Although Mr. Nia has signs of a cold, these symptoms are caused by poison and not a cold. Drinking these medicines will not only not treat the symptoms but will also worsen the poison entering the body." After Wei Yong heard this, he was so angry that his whole body trembled. If not for the fact that the situation was not right, he would have drawn the sword at his waist and killed all of the accompanying physicians. "Eldest brother, you said that all the doctors spoke the same words. I'm afraid there's something fishy behind this." Wei Ci did not say much, but his meaning was clear. It was not an accident that Niao Yang was poisoned and killed. The actions of the few physicians were also instigated by the mastermind. Rather than venting his anger on a few physicians and making the mastermind vigilant, it was better to beat them at their own game. Niao Yang lowered his head slightly, a few rays of light flashed past his eyes. He smiled weakly and said softly, "Family scandals should not be spread in public. I've embarrassed myself in front of Zixiao." Wei Ci wrote a new prescription for Niao Yang. "Mr. Nia's body has accumulated a lot of poison, but getting rid of it is not a day's work. Mr.'s body is not suitable for heavy medicine now, so we can only take it slowly. My medical skills are limited. Mr. Nia, you can find a trusted medical officer later." His slender fingers pinched the pen and dropped the pen. His handwriting was clean and beautiful, pleasing to the eye. Niao Yang said, "No need. Zixiao's medical skills are good and trustworthy." Wei Ci did not reply and handed the prescription to Wei Yong. "Does Mr. Nia have any other instructions?" Niao Yang knew that Wei Ci was planning to leave. "There is indeed one thing." Niao Yang's eyes wandered and said awkwardly, "There's licorice in the prescription. Can the amount be heavier?" "Afraid of bitterness?" Wei Ci asked with his eyes. Niao Yang hesitated for a second between bitterness and disgrace, before decisively choosing the latter. Feng Zhen, who had been in the background, was speechless. He seemed to have found out a secret. Niao Yang was seriously ill and could not get up to send him off. He could only let Wei Yong take his place to be polite. After a distance, Feng Zhen's gossipy nature could not help itself. Why did Zixiao save him? Although he did not understand Niao Yang's position in the Nie family, he felt that this person was not easy to deal with. Leaving him alive would be a disaster. The master of the Nie family is Niao Yang's grandfather. This old man was an influential figure when he was young. Now that he is old, he is still full of energy and does not lose to the younger generation. He controls the Nie family's authority. Wei Ci said coldly, although he is not muddle-headed, he has not chosen a suitable successor. As time drags on, his children will gradually grow up and the people's hearts will waver. They will start to think about things they should not. Feng Zhen immediately thought of the Su family from Zhe County. The two brothers Su Bei and Su Fei fought so fiercely. Wasn't it because the grandfather favored the youngest grandson and caused a fight between the eldest grandson and the second grandson? The Nie family situation was more complicated than the Su family. The two sons of the old master of the Su family were both dead, leaving only two grandsons. The Nie family was different. Each branch feels that they have hope. How can they live in peace? Wei Ci's eyes flashed with a trace of memory. In his previous life, when he lived in seclusion in Zhongzhao's Bianzhou, he had also been solicited by the second branch of the Nie family. They tried to pit him against the fifth branch that his elder brother worked for. Niao Yang is the most outstanding of the grandchildren. He also holds the title of the eldest son of the fifth branch. If he gains the favor of the old master, the status of the fifth branch will rise along with him. Thus, some people could not resist. After hearing this, Feng Zhen finally understood the whole story. In that case, if Niao Yang is alive, he can muddy the waters of the Nie family even more? Wei Ci nodded. Exactly. Feng Zhen smacked his lips. Just watch. That Niao Yang is not simple. If he is allowed to live and clean up the internal affairs of the Nie family, he will be a formidable opponent. Ci said that Niao Yang's body is not suitable to expend too much effort and energy. Wei Ci lowered his eyes and said, moreover, the internal affairs of the Nie family are intertwined. To clean them up is not something that can be done in a day or two. Although Niao Yang is the most outstanding of the grandchildren, the fifth branch of the Nie family does not have much power. If not for this, the mission of diplomatic envoy to another country would not have landed on Niao Yang. If he wants to clean up the Nie family, there is still a long way to go. Feng Zhen's mouth twitched. He asked blankly, if he does not follow the doctor's advice, Wei Ci said, his lifespan will be shortened. Internal strife was common in every aristocratic family. Even the righteous Shangyang Feng family could not avoid it. Chapter 1097. Isn't my lord worried about having no one to restrain the Nie family? Wei Ci smiled. Niao Yang is the best pawn. He was a pawn that came to him on his own accord. In this regard, Feng Zhen could only cheer for Wei Ci and cheer him brainlessly. You can even think of such a way to make the Nie family fall into internal strife. How can you be so cunning? Feng Zhen said disdainfully, but his eyes showed otherwise. However, I'm curious about one thing. How do you know so much about the Nie family? Since ancient times, one should not wash one's dirty linen in public. Only the Nie family knows about the internal strife. How could it be spread everywhere? Wei Ci was busy with government affairs and battles everywhere with the army. How could he have the time to gather information? Trade between Zhongzhao and Dongqing was basically closed. There were almost no other channels for information. How did Wei Ci know so much? Wei Ci put his hands behind his back. His clothes fluttered in the wind. He looked at the sky and sighed. Feng Zhen stretched out his ears to hear the answer. Wei Ci said, the secrets of heaven cannot be revealed. Feng Zhen was speechless. You'll lose the baby. Wei Ci couldn't stand Feng Zhen's resentful gaze. He said helplessly, I calculated it by watching the stars day and night. Why don't you say it was Guo Yu who told you? Wei Ci was able to see this from observing the stars. Did Wei Ci really think that Feng Zhen did not understand the art of astrology? Wei Ci answered readily, not only can I control ghosts, but I also understand the language of beasts. I know what plants are saying. Feng Zhen's eyes widened in shock. He sneered. Wei Zixiao, you really panted when I said you're fat. The two bickered for a while and unknowingly returned to their home base. Wei Xi told Jiang Pingji the good news. Niao Yang's return to the Nie family would probably cause a storm. He couldn't manage Zhangzhou for the time being. This news is timely, Jiang Pingji said. But can Niao Yang defeat the other old foxes of the Nie family? Jiang Pingji began to worry that Niao Yang wasn't strong enough. Wouldn't it be a pity if he died too quickly? Wei Xi said confidently, Niao Yang is known as the ghost of the Nie family. If he hadn't schemed in secret, the Nie family wouldn't be so strong. Now that the Nie family wants to get rid of him, he's probably very disappointed. My lord, Niao Yang may look harmless, but he is definitely not an indecisive person. If these cancerous tumors continued to plague the Nie clan, the clan's foundation would definitely be ruined. Given his temperament, there's no way he would watch the Nie clan decline without doing anything. According to Zixiao, this person isn't a fool. Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest and said with a frown, he should know that he's dealing with the internal strife, so he won't have time to attend to Zhangzhou. He'll miss a good opportunity. Letting a tiger return to the mountain will cause endless troubles in the future. How could he not know? Wei Xi smiled and said, you can't have your cake and eat it too. So what if Nie Guangshan knows? Where there is gain there must be loss. If he cared about one side he would neglect the other. Niao Yang knew how to choose. In his past life, Wei Xi had very little contact with this genius from the Nie family. From what he understood, the family held a very heavy weight in Niao Yang's heart. With the current situation, was it more important to expand outward and allow the family to have internal strife, or was it more important to purge the family? Niao Yang had a balance in his heart and would not lose the bigger picture because of a small thing. Jiang Pingji said, Zixiao, make the decision. I trust you. However, before the Nie family leaves, we must first settle the matter in Zhangzhou. The Nie family pressured Huang Song so that Jiang Pingji could use this as leverage to exchange for the two counties in Zhangzhou. If the Nie family's diplomatic group left, Huang Song might act shamelessly. Wei Xi said, yes. The next day Feng Zhu and Qing Jing came to visit on behalf of Huang Song. The two of them were quite tactful. They did not ask Jiang Pingji stupid questions such as why she sent troops to Qinzhou. Huang Song had done wrong in Qinzhou. Jiang Pingji had retaliated, so they could not reprimand her. Otherwise they would have scolded Huang Song as well. The two of them were straightforward and decisive. They tested Jiang Pingji's tone a little. With a plan in mind, Feng Zhu revealed his suggestion to exchange the two counties in Zhangzhou for Qinzhou. Jiang Pingji smiled and leaned on the table. Is this Bogeo's idea? Feng Zhu said calmly, of course it's my lord's idea. Although I'm trusted by my lord, I dare not act on my own. The two counties in Zhangzhou are a fat piece of meat that the strategists must fight for. Bogeo is actually willing to exchange them for Qinzhou. Isn't this a great loss? Feng Zhu said, my lord and the magistrate of Liuzhou are as close as brother and sister. When has a family ever said such things? My lord doesn't care about these gains and losses. What's important is the stability of the alliance between the two families. My lord didn't handle the matter with Meng Zhan well. He worried day and night that it would cause a rift between the magistrate of Liuzhou. After thinking about it, this is the only way to make up for it. I hope that you don't mind. I can report to my lord and let him feel at ease. Feng Zhu could not see that a group of fans were cheering him on across dimensions. The comments were even more varied. Zhongfei, yesterday's stars. I've finally seen it. This streaming room is full of drama queens and big shots who lie with their eyes open. Yu Yanran. If I hadn't been following the updates and knew the whole story, I would have thought that Huang Song had really suffered a loss. He and the streamer only had a fake plastic sibling relationship. Why did Feng Zhu say that they were model siblings? This was the highest realm of lying with their eyes open. Emodoncy, it's not enough to lie with your eyes open. The key is to be thick-skinned. I like people who are so shameless. Xi Jing. Although Brother Feng doesn't appear many times, I really like him. I'm cheering for him. Jiang Pingji ignored the contents of the bullet screen. She smiled and said, Bogeo and I are not strangers. I don't agree with what Huijie said. Feng Zhu said, so you agree to it? Jiang Pingji revealed a doting smile. Since Bogeo likes Qinzhou, Qinzhou will be given to him. Feng Zhu looked hesitant and only spoke after a while. There's one more thing. I don't know how you plan to deal with it. Huijie, just say what you want to say. Feng Zhu asked. Meng Zhan brutally killed the royal family and overturned the universe. My lord sent troops to rescue him and station them in Qinzhou. However, the valiant generals under the command of Lu mistook them for rebels and detained them as captives. If I may ask, have you thought about how to deal with them? He was asking her for captives. Jiang Pingji smiled and squinted her eyes. She was very generous. Since it's a misunderstanding, how can I detain Bogeo's men and not let them go? When Jing Rong comes over, I'll ask him to supervise this matter. He thought that Jiang Pingji would deliberately make things difficult or detain the captives, but it went unexpectedly smoothly. Feng Zhu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After leaving the main tent, Qing Jing said to Feng Zhu, I have a bad feeling about this. Feng Zhu frowned. Yes. Magistrate Lu's expression is too relaxed. He doesn't seem to be afraid of being surrounded by enemies on all sides. Putting oneself on the edge of death to survive? It was easy to say, but it was extremely difficult to do it. The two of them left together and happened to see a familiar figure leaving in a hurry. His expression was a little strange. Qing Jing glanced at Nie Sun's departing figure. Why is he here? Chapter 1098. Qing Jing's eyebrows twitched as he asked hesitantly, as close as brothers? The two of them have a good relationship. Feng Zhu fell silent. News of what had happened in the dungeon that day had not spread, so not many people knew the truth. Qing Jing was not one of them. He said lightly, blood brothers. The nerves in the corner of Qing Jing's eyes seemed to be going out of control. It was as if he wanted to say something. Blood brothers? Those three short words made Qing Jing think of Nie Sun's and Meng Heng's backgrounds. In his mind, he imagined a tragic scene in the backyard of a landowning household. Scope. The Lord is still waiting for us to report back. Feng Zhu took a deep breath and suppressed the waves in his heart. At this sensitive moment, Nie Sun and Meng Heng were very close. Even though they were brothers, it was still suspicious. If the Lord were to find out, who knew what she would imagine? Now that the situation is turbulent, suspicion and infighting are taboo. Honestly, people of this character are trustworthy. It's better to keep this a secret. Qing Jing understood what Feng Zhu meant. Suspicion and jealousy would not only cause the ruler to distance himself from his subordinates, it would also cause the subordinates to feel disappointed and distance themselves from the ruler. However, the two of them forgot. They had the intention to help cover it up, but they couldn't stop people from watching Nie Sun and snitching on him. When the two of them went back to report, they found that Huang Song's expression was not very good. His gloomy expression seemed to be brewing a storm. When he saw Qing Jing and Feng Zhu coming together, he immediately put away his angry expression and asked, Is it done? Feng Zhu cupped his hands and reported, I didn't fail you. It has been done. Huang Song's expression relaxed a little and his tone became a little warmer. It's good that it's done. Thank you for your hard work. Feng Zhu noticed Huang Song's strange expression and asked tentatively, My lord, you don't look worried just now. Did you encounter a difficult problem? Huijie. What kind of person do you think Qing Yun is? Huang Song trusted Feng Zhu far more than anyone else. If this question had been asked by someone else, he would most likely have evaded the question and sent the person away. However, Feng Zhu was different. This person really has no ulterior motives? Feng Zhu was horrified. I've always been loyal and sincere to my lord. How could I be disloyal? Why would my lord say such chilling words? Huang Song's face turned pale and he looked a little ashamed. He should not have doubted Nie Sun's loyalty because of Yuan Xian's repeated instigation and snitching. He sighed. Then I'm overthinking things. Feng Zhu asked with a serious expression, Could it be that someone has slandered the Lord again? Huang Song did not hide it. After all, Yuan Xian and Nie Sun did not get along, and it was no secret that Yuan Xian often snitched on Nie Sun. Feng Zhu was silent for a while. A trace of irritation arose in his heart, but he restrained his expression and advised seriously, My lord, the matter has not been concluded yet, so you can't make wild guesses. If you have any misgivings, you can call Qing Yun over and ask him about it openly and honestly. If he did things openly, there was naturally nothing to hide. If he really has ulterior motives, his expression and actions will also reveal flaws. Instead of filling in the air with suspicions and causing the two of them to gradually drift apart, it was better to ask the person in question. The awkwardness on Huang Song's face deepened. Feng Ju's trust in Yesun made him feel ashamed. This is my fault. I will definitely apologize to Qing Yun. When Feng Ju heard this, his heart relaxed. Little did he know that Huang Song's apology was not to go to Yesun's door to confide in him and completely eliminate his suspicions. It was not that Huang Song felt ashamed to apologize to an official, but because going to his door to apologize was a little like revealing the truth. Wasn't this clearly telling Yesun that he was suspicious of him because of someone else's snitch? Since he could not go to his door to apologize, Huang Song thought about it and sent the rewards to Yesun like water. After receiving the generous rewards, Yesun was confused. He had not performed any meritorious deeds recently, so why did the Lord suddenly give him such a big reward? The young and humble could not refuse a reward from the Lord. Naturally, the Lord had to keep the rewards well, but he did not know that it made Yuan Exin even more annoyed and angry. Yesun had a close relationship with Meng Heng and was suspected of having ulterior motives. Not only did he not receive a heavy punishment, but he also received a generous reward. What was this? Although everyone did not put their conflict out in the open, they were well aware of it. When the Nye family's diplomatic mission suddenly proposed to leave, this buried bomb completely detonated and stunned a circle of people. Because of the Nye family's pressure, Huang Song only agreed to exchange Songzhou and Qinzhou after much consideration. So when Ye Liang led the Nye family's diplomatic mission to say goodbye, Huang Song was grinning on the surface but cursing in his heart. Did Ye Liang come all the way from Zhongzhou just to play a trick on him? The Nye family's diplomatic group had just left without any warning, let alone further pressure or threaten them. Huang Song's decision to give up the 2 counties of Songzhou seemed foolish. It was no wonder that when Feng Ju and Qing Jing went over, Jiang Pingji agreed without any hesitation. Suddenly Huang Song thought of a detail. Although it was Feng Ju's persuasion that made him make up his mind about exchanging Songzhou and Qinzhou, the original person who suggested it was Yesun. However, thinking about the situation at that time, Yesun's suggestion was a good way out. Who knew that the Nye family would change their mind so quickly and catch everyone off guard? Huang Song could only suppress this strange emotion and spend a lot of time discussing the next arrangements with his confidants. If that was the case, Huang Song would be able to let go of this matter in a few days. However, Yuan Exin refused to give up. In his opinion, Yesun was arrogant and ungrateful. His lord had let him off time and time again, but instead of being loyal and repaying her kindness, he repaid her kindness with enmity. Even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will definitely let my lord see this person's true colors. Yuan Exin visited Huang Song in the middle of the night with a solemn and stirring mood, as if he was going to the guillotine. Huang Song could only crawl out of bed. He wore a thin shirt over his sleeping clothes and his expression was full of sleepiness. Captain Yuan, what urgent matter can't be left until tomorrow? Why must you visit me in the middle of the night? Seeing Yuan Exin now, Huang Song could not help but feel a headache coming on. Yuan Exin said with tears streaming down his face, "My lord, this is irrefutable evidence that Yesun and Lu Shi are working together." When Huang Song heard this, he could no longer hold back his suppressed anger, but only coldness remained on his face. "Oh, what do you mean?" Yuan Exin said, "Some time ago, I often saw that Yesun and Meng Heng from Lu Shi's side were in close contact. The two of them always avoided others when they talked as if they were talking about something unspeakable. After that, Yesun suggested to my lord that we exchanged Songzhou and Qinzhou. I thought that Lu Shi must have gotten some news that the Nye family's envoy was about to leave and couldn't care about Songzhou, so he instructed Yesun to mislead my lord. If that wasn't the case, why would Lu Shi take the loss and agree to the exchange without making things difficult for us? At that time, exchanging Qinzhou and Songzhou for Songzhou and Qinzhou was very disadvantageous and risky. The more Yuan Exin thought about it, the more he felt that Yesun's suggestion was not well-intentioned. Huang Song's expression changed again and again. After a while he said, "I have my own conclusions about this matter. Captain Yuan, don't interfere." When Yuan Exin heard this, he felt indignant. Chapter 1099. As the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes. Even though Yang Xi's speed wasn't slow when he arrived at Songzhou, The Nye clan's diplomatic mission had just left. My lord, I'm late. Xianxia took the initiative to apologize. His voice was a little nasal. He hadn't had the time to take care of his appearance, so he looked particularly disheveled. Dian Yan also hurriedly apologized. This lowly one was late, please forgive me, lord. Jiang Pingji helped them up. Not too late, not too late. You came just in time. Jingrong, your voice doesn't sound right. Are you sick? Xianxia said, I caught a cold. I'll be fine after taking a few doses of medicine. Dian Yan pulled the rug out from under his feet. The military counselor has been busy for days, he almost doesn't have time to drink medicine to recuperate. This cold has been going on for almost a month. Jiang Pingji furrowed her brows. Get the military doctor to treat Jing Rong carefully. Even if it's just a minor illness, we can't take it lightly. Xianxia was unable to reject her good intentions. Instead, he felt warmth in his heart. Niao Yang was poisoned by someone, which was why he had an incurable cold for so long. Xianxia was delayed for a month purely because he did not have a good rest. Wei Ci secretly took a look at the prescription given by the military doctor. It was indeed the right medicine. Only then did he feel at ease and allowed someone to prescribe the medicine for the patient. Zixiao, do you know why the Nye clan's diplomatic mission suddenly left? How could the Nye family be willing to relent when they hadn't gotten any benefits? Wei Ci communicated with Xianxia and roughly explained the recent situation so that the other party would have a sense of what was going on. Xianxia was speechless after hearing that. If I had known this earlier, I wouldn't have had to travel day and night and lose weight. If he couldn't recuperate, he would lose his appetite. Xianxia had lost a lot of weight recently. Wei Ci glanced at him suspiciously. How did I lose weight? As they were talking, Jiang Pingji called them into the tent. Has Jing Rong settled all of Bogeo's troops in Qinzhou? Jiang Pingji still wanted to take Zhangzhou. At present, Qinzhou was not of great strategic importance to her. Xianxia perked up and stepped out of the ranks. As per my lord's orders, the captives have been properly settled. As the saying goes, don't bother two masters for one thing. Why don't you let Jing Rong handle the exchange between Zhangzhou and Qinzhou? Do you have any objections? Xianxia, who was still a patient, secretly grinned. He didn't dare to have any objections. Rainbow sweetheart. Awu, long time no see little Cici. Green arrow peppermint. I'm rooting for Rongrong like crazy. He could only blame the heartless host for not letting him appear for a few years. Back then, when Xianxia first appeared on the scene, he had garnered countless fans and a huge fan club. Ever since Jiang Pingji sent Xianxia to Hu County, there had been no sign of him in the streaming room for the past few years. Many fans abandoned their old loves and sought refuge in the arms of their new loves. At present, most of the people who were still fans of Xianxia were his diehard fans. Bai Qi, the streamer is really crazy. Little Rongrong is still a patient. Can't you have some love? My husband Su Taotan. If the host is in love, then Xianxia will be so scared, right? Love and producer. I'm begging the streamer not to send Xiao Rongrong to such a remote place. It's better to keep her by your side. The audience loved it madly, but unfortunately Xianxia, the person involved, did not know. Yes, I won't let you down. Xianxia cupped his hands and bowed, accepting the task. By the way, how are the Su brothers in Zhou County doing? After all, they were future opponents. Only by knowing oneself and one's enemy could one win 100 battles. Xianxia said, you don't have to be afraid of Su Fei, but this Su Bei. My lord, you have to pay attention to him. Jiang Pingji said, oh? Su Fei is a radical person. He's brave but reckless. Now that he's been beaten by his cousin Su Bei, he's like a turtle hiding on the ground. It looks like he won't be able to hold on for long. If nothing unexpected happens, there should be no hope for him to make a comeback. Xianxia said, Su Bei is different. He's courteous and humble, and he's from a prestigious family. He's recruited many talents and outstanding talents. Among them, his trusted strategist Han Yu is the most outstanding. Han Yu is treacherous, shrewd, and meticulous. He's not easy to deal with. Han Yu, no matter what, he's Master Yuanjing's brilliant disciple. If he's an ordinary person, he'll be letting down Master Yuanjing's teachings. Upon hearing this long-lost name, Jiang Pingji's first impression was of the handsome youth from the Yi River in Hejian. Xianxia nodded. He could barely be considered Master Yuanjing's adopted son. According to their relationship, he and Han Yu could be considered fellow disciples. Yang Si briefly reported the happenings in Hu County over the past few years. Jiang Pingji listened attentively. Yang Si's abilities were outstanding. Over the past few years he'd worked on two fronts simultaneously. Not only had he ruled Hu County into an iron fortress, but he'd also ensured that the people under his rule lived and worked in peace and contentment. He'd also put in a lot of effort to maintain his alliance with Su Bei, pitting his wits and courage against each other. Over the past few years he hadn't made a single mistake. This wasn't something an ordinary person could achieve. Jingrong, it's been hard on you all these years. I'm just doing my duty. I dare not claim credit, Yang Si said humbly. After Yang Si, it was Dian Yan's turn. Jiang Pingji didn't inquire about Dian Yan's military or political affairs. Instead she gave him a test. The result was unexpected. Dian Yan, who didn't know much about literature, could answer her questions fluently. In the past few years, Deputy Commander Dian has put in a lot of effort to learn. Now that he's been reborn, it's really amazing. Most of the generals under Jiang Pingji's command had been promoted several times. Only Dian Yan hadn't moved since he was promoted to Deputy Commander. It wasn't that she was stingy or that Dian Yan hadn't performed enough meritorious deeds. It was just that Dian Yan's foundation was the weakest. She wanted to train him well before she put him in an important position. A general who was brave but not astute wouldn't last long. After the test, her impression of Dian Yan was refreshed. Dian Yan smiled foolishly and said cautiously, "It's all thanks to military advisor Yang, who doesn't think I'm slow-witted and always gives me pointers." It wasn't enough to rely on one's charisma to lead a force. One had to use both the carrot and the stick. One had to reward and punish those who deserved it. Jiang Pingji wasn't a stingy person. Yang Si and Dian Yan should receive the rewards they deserved. Only then would they be willing to sacrifice their lives for her. When Huang Song heard that Yang Si was in charge of this matter, the anger in his heart rose rapidly. This person was his nemesis. Yuan Exin was a military man. When he thought about problems, he followed his own preferences. He saw that Huang Song regretted exchanging Zhangzhou and Qinzhou for Qinzhou. He said in a tiger's voice, "If my lord isn't willing, you can break the agreement." Huang Song's secret thoughts were exposed by Yuan Exin. He was embarrassed and humiliated. Before he could speak, Niesun said, "Commander Yuan, have you calculated how many troops Lu Shi has in Zhangzhou?" Seeing that it was Niesun, Yuan Exin snorted coldly. "At most 5,000. Niesun said, "If it was before, this number would be correct." But Yang Si led his troops from Qinzhou to Zhangzhou. He also brought 2,000 troops with him. In total it's 7,000. In addition, Lu Shi's main force is stationed at the border of Qianyan County. At the border of Qinzhou, there are also the elites that Yang Si brought from Hu County. In total there's no less than 60,000. Commander Yuan, have you thought about who will be at a disadvantage if so many troops are mobilized at the same time? If you want to break the agreement, you should look at the situation first. Yuan Exin was rebuked by Niesun. He was furious. He couldn't help but say, "Since Mr. Nie knows Lu Shi's troops so well, it's obvious that you've put in a lot of effort. Where did this information come from? Did you really find it out yourself, or did your good brother secretly leak it?" Chapter 1100. What do you mean, Captain Yuan? Niesun's face was livid. His hands were clenched so tightly in his sleeves that the veins on the back of his hands popped. Seeing that Niesun was still resisting, Yuan Exin sneered and asked in a neutral tone, "What do I mean? Mr. Nie is usually very intelligent. Why are you pretending to be deaf and mute now? Do you dare to swear that you have nothing to do with Meng Hing under Lu Shi?" Niesun clenched his teeth. Everyone in the tent looked at Yuan Exin at the same time. Except for a few people, the others only knew that Niesun and Meng Hing were close. What kind of secret relationship did they have? With this doubt, their eyes became more inquisitive. Yuan Exin's question showed that the relationship between Niesun and Meng Hing was deeper than they thought. "What, Mr. Nie doesn't dare to swear?" Yuan Exin asked in an overbearing manner. Even with a full beard, others could see a hint of pride in his swollen eyes. He sneered and said in a relaxed tone, "If you don't dare, does that mean you admit it?" Niesun pursed his lips and stared at Yuan Exin with his dark eyes. "What does Captain Yuan want me to admit? Admit that Meng Hing is Sun's brother? So what? Sun has never done anything to betray the Lord or leak secrets. Why did Captain Yuan have to be so sarcastic? If you want to slander me, please show me solid evidence or it will be a false accusation. Hearing Nie Sun admit his relationship with Meng Heng, the others were also surprised. They had worked with Nie Sun for many years and had never heard that Nie Sun was Meng Heng's younger brother. If it was true, why did Nie Sun hide it? They were not the only brothers in different camps. It was not a big deal to make their relationship public. But Nie Sun chose to hide it, which would inevitably make people think too much. Yuan Exen was surprised that Nie Sun admitted it in public, but he would not let Nie Sun go because of this. Mr. Nie, whether there was a betrayal or not, this is not something Mr. Nie can deny easily. Yuan Exen sneered. Mr. Nie, if you didn't secretly collude with Meng Heng and know something in advance, why did you suggest the Lord to exchange Songzhou and Chenzhou? Nie Sun felt that this question was ridiculous. I am not a saint. How can I plan everything? Who knew what the Nie family's envoy was thinking? When they came in a menacing manner, but when they left there were no signs. Yuan Exen sneered. It's useless to quibble. If you want to prove that you are trustworthy, please. Nie Sun was so angry at Yuan Xian's unreasonable pestering that the 3 corpses god exploded. If it weren't for his 20 years of self-control, he would have left. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Huang Song, who was sitting in the seat of honor. His already terrible mood immediately sank into an icy cold pond. Since Yuan Xian's revolt, Huang Song as the Lord had not stopped Yuan Exen. What did this mean? This meant that Huang Song was suspicious of him and wanted to use Yuan Xian's mouth to ask for an explanation and at the same time to knock him down a peg. Huang Nya. He and the same. He nya he and said he said arrogantly, forget it. If Commandant Yuan doesn't believe me, then so be it. Sun is loyal to the Lord. I only need the Lord to believe me. As soon as he finished speaking, Huang Song, who was seated at the head of the table, interrupted him. He reprimanded Yuan Exen and fined him a month's pay. Other than that, he didn't do anything else. When Nie Sun saw this, the coldness expanded and spread, forcefully invading his limbs and brain. The Lord was suspicious. Huang Song said, a gentleman keeps his word. Since he promised to exchange with Lanting, he can't go back on his word. And Qingyun will supervise this. We must do it safely. We can't let Lanting see us as a joke. Do you have any other opinions? Nie Sun and Qing Jing stepped forward. Yes. Nie Sun was not in the mood to care about what they talked about after that. From the beginning to the end he looked absent-minded. The meeting ended and everyone left. Nie Sun walked out of the tent. The slightly chilly wind blew against his cheeks, causing him to shiver and wake up with a start. Qingyun, let's talk in private. Qing Jing's voice came from beside him. Nie Sun's face darkened. Yumo, you believe what Captain Yuan said? Qing Jing said, of course not. I'm afraid you fell into Lu Shi's trap. Even if they were related by blood, how much affection could a pair of brothers who had never met have? Meng Heng often looked for Nie Sun. Although they only talked about personal matters and not official matters, the coincidences made people suspicious. Qing Jing understood Jiang Pingji's treachery, so he trusted his own judgment. Nie Sun laughed bitterly. Whether it's a trap or not, the Lord is already suspicious. How can it be easily dispelled? The seed of suspicion had already taken root and sprouted. How could it be so easy to eliminate it? Yuan Exen was to be blamed. If he hadn't reported Huang Song again and again, Huang Song wouldn't have been suspicious. Nie Sun said, moreover, if Captain Yuan didn't stir up trouble, why would the Lord suspect me? If Meng Heng and Sun were instigated by Lu Shi, then it shouldn't be Lu Shi's idea for Captain Yuan to provoke and cause trouble again and again, right? The Lord. Nie Sun wanted to say that Huang Song wasn't strict with his subordinates and that he was biased against outsiders. However, the person in front of him was Qing Jing, whom Huang Song relied on. He couldn't bring himself to say it. Captain Yuan went overboard, Qing Jing said in a low voice. Qing Jing said in a low voice. He has repeatedly slandered him, but the Lord has always been lenient towards him. This is truly biased. Qing Jing believed that Huang Song stood firmly on Nie Sun's side from the beginning. If Huang Song had severely punished Yuan Exen at that time, scolded or demoted him, would Yuan Exen have had the guts to go around snitching? It was precisely because of Huang Song's indulgence that Yuan Exen's arrogance was boosted. Nyesun sighed and there was some worry between his brows. I understand what you mean, Yumo. The Lord is the Lord and Captain Yuan is Captain Yuan. I won't abandon my duties for my personal reasons. Qingjing said all this to absolve Huang Song and dispel Nyesun's resentment towards Huang Song. Qingyun is very understanding. The corners of Nyesun's mouth twitched but he didn't comment. Huang Song was so indulgent towards Yuan Exin. Other than being relatives, there was another reason. The Yuan family was Huang Song's main family. Most of the generals under him were from the Yuan family. As long as Yuan Exin didn't commit an unforgivable crime, Huang Song would deal with him lightly and wouldn't punish him heavily. On the contrary, Nyesun's situation wasn't so optimistic. He had no foundation on Huang Song's side and he didn't have many friends. His network was close to zero. As a lone official, he was definitely the person the Lord trusted the most because he wouldn't form a clique for personal gain. But once the Lord became suspicious of him and lost his trust, he would be in the most dangerous situation. Suddenly, Nyesun remembered what Meng Hing had said to him. Brother Sun, you grew up in the Nye family of Zhongzhou and you have the blood of the Meng family of Zhangzhou. Huang Song, will he really trust you? Chapter 1101. Senior Brother Qing. Yang Si knew that there would be a tough battle to fight next, so he ate a good meal to boost his morale and went to the battlefield valiantly. The corners of Qingjing's mouth twitched slightly. He didn't know if he should accept Yang Si's attempt to get close to him. Nyesun, who was at the side, looked at Qingjing in surprise. His eyes were clearly filled with question marks. When did Qingjing become Yang Si's senior brother? That's not right. Why are Lu Shi's men and Huang Song's men so inextricably linked? If they're not brothers, they're martial brothers or uncle and nephew. There must be poison. Qingjing's eyes darkened and he readily agreed. Compared to Yang Si's enthusiastic attitude, Qingjing's reaction seemed a little cold. Yang Si was not angry. There was even a smile on his face. He was determined to use his hot face to stick to the cold buttocks of others. I've often heard Mr. mention senior brother. It's been many years since we last met. Senior brother is indeed a dragon among men. I like you very much. Yang Si was an orphan adopted by Master Yuanjing when he was young. Although he did not bring him back to Langya County to be raised, his identity was not a secret. Qingjing was Master Yuanjing's first disciple, so it was reasonable for Yang Si to call him senior brother. Junior brother Yang is not bad either. He has not let down Master's many years of guidance. Qingjing put on a fake smile. Nyesun had been tricked, so Qingjing did not dare to get too close to Jiang Pingji's tent. However, Yang Si was thick-skinned enough to play the role of two people. Qingjing, there was so much drama. Although they were from the same sect, neither of them showed any mercy when it came to the conflict of interests. Qingjing did his best to fight for the benefits that Huang Song deserved. Not only did he want the entire territory of Qinzhou, but he also wanted a large number of landowning households, the families of court officials, the captured generals and soldiers, the granaries and arsenals at the various passes. He had considered almost every loophole that could be exploited. Yang Si's side was almost the same. Not only did he have to extract benefits from Huang Song's side, but he also had to ensure the benefits that he had already eaten. The royal family of Dongqing moved the capital to Qinzhou and took away a large number of aristocrats and nobles of Dongqing. Although Prince Changshu had snatched away a portion of them, the gentry talents left behind were still considerable, almost enough to support half of the imperial court. These were all priceless treasures, far more valuable than land. If it wasn't for the fact that Jiang Pingji was taking a different route, she wouldn't have given up this part of the profits. Landowning households, officials, their families, captured soldiers. These could all be cut off at the discretion of the situation, but the stored food and weapons were a little more sensitive. Yang Si wanted to falsify the numbers and secretly swallow a part of it. However, Qinzhou was occupied by Huang Song first and he had detailed records of the accounts. As long as he checked the accounts, Qingjing would know how much Yang Si had falsely reported at a glance. Even if Yang Si wanted to go back on his word, Qingjing would still be able to protect most of the profits. On the contrary, Jiang Pingji had never interfered with Song and Zhou counties, so she did not understand the situation within the two counties. Even though Meng Hing was now under her banner, Meng Hing didn't know the situation in Zhangzhou, so he couldn't be of much help. Therefore it was very difficult for Yang Si to determine how much Qingjing had concealed or misreported. Under such circumstances, Xianxia could only rely on his own ability and intuition to determine the bottom line. After a round of negotiations, Xianxia seemed to be in high spirits, but in fact he was so hungry that his chest was sticking to his back and his mind was muddled. Huang Baigao is really cunning. He could have just sent Qingjing, but he added Nyesun. He was already at a disadvantage, but Xianxia still fought against two people alone. If Xianxia was not an experienced and astute veteran, he would have been gnawed to pieces by Qingjing and Nyesun. It's been hard on you. Wei Xiai smiled as he picked food for Xianxia. The table was full of his favorite food. As long as there was delicious food, Xianxia's bad mood would improve. After he was somewhat full, Xianxia had the energy to care about other things. What does my lord mean by this? You actually want to abandon the gentry people? Xianxia looked around. Seeing that there was no one else around, he felt at ease and whispered into Wei Xi's ear. The two had a very good relationship and spoke freely. Even if they talked about some treasonous things, Xianxia could drag Wei Xiai out to take the blame. The lord had coveted Wei Xiai for a long time. He was a death exemption medallion. Jiang Pingji secretly instructed Xianxia that if Huang Song wanted to take away the local gentry people from Zhangzhou and Zhou counties, he would take them away if he could. Of course, if Huang Song wanted to take away these talents, he would have to exchange them with equivalent benefits. Wei Xiai removed the bones from the braised fish and said, "My lord has the golden scale pavilion. She can pick out useful talents almost every 1 or 2 months. Although it's not the best, it's practical and trustworthy. Moreover, the students of the Golden Scale Academy are not bad. There's no need to cling to the gentry people and not let go." Before Wei Xiai could eat, Xianxia had already shamelessly snatched the plate away, looking like he was protecting his food. "In that case, my lord's ambitions are not small." Xianxia smiled. He was also born into a poor family. His background was very low. Naturally, he did not want a group of gentry people who were high and mighty but did not do anything to criticize him. His lord's actions were deeply in line with his intentions. "It's better to say this in private. Don't say it out loud," Wei Xiai reminded him. It was a fact that his lord rarely used the gentry people. However, he could not let the outside world know clearly that she rejected the gentry people in order to avoid provoking resistance. Xianxia smiled and said, "I'm not a 3-year-old child. How can I not know the severity of the matter?" Wei Xiai sighed softly to himself. Giving up on roping in the gentry people and cutting off the support of this part of the forces would definitely be difficult on the road to attaining the throne. Who asked the gentry people to occupy nearly 60% of the world's wealth. The remaining 30% belonged to the royal family. Only 10% belonged to the people. Because Qingjing and Nyesun retained half of the interests, Huang Song's complexion was much better. Next, as long as the two forces smoothly handed over their power, the Battle of Zhangzhou would come to a successful end. Xianxia brought the account book to see Jiang Pingji. She was making a sand table. Not only were there undulating mountains, hills and cities on the sand table, but there were also obvious rivers and borderlines. Xianxia saw a mini flag that represented the northern borderline, Tongzhou, Wanzhou, Zhangzhou County and other places. A strange animal's head was drawn on the flag. It had 2 black ears and 2 black eye sockets. It looked like it had been suffocated twice. Its big face was completely white. Looking at it, it looked like an iron-eating beast that Wei Xiai hugged and stroked all day long. "Jing Rong is here?" Jiang Pingji raised her head and put down the tools in her hands. She patted the sand in her palms and asked, "How did it go?" "Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you." Although she said so, she felt a little guilty. Xianxia did not have a concrete idea of the wealth of Zhangzhou and Zhangzhou. He could only make a rough judgment based on the taxes collected in previous years. Although he did not know how much profit he had fought for, it was definitely enough for 40%. Jiang Pingji flipped through the account book. The figures in it were all above her bottom line. "You've worked hard." Jiang Pingji revealed a satisfied smile. Since he had done a good job, he naturally had to be rewarded. However, apart from delicacies, Jiang Pingji really did not know that Xianxia had any other hobbies. After thinking about it, she felt that it was better to reward him with delicacies. Apart from money, Jiang Pingji gave her mansion's chef to Xianxia. He could cook whatever he liked. If the ingredients were insufficient, he could ask her for reimbursement. Chapter 1102. Your Highness, this is? I made the sand table. Jiang Pingji sounded like she was showing off, as if she was waiting for a compliment. How is it? Xianxia said, "My lord is clever and skillful." She did it vividly. It's as if she had shrunk the entire mountains and rivers and moved them here. Currently the sand table was the simplest and crudest, but the one Jiang Pingji made was very exquisite and three-dimensional. The topography of the mountains could be seen clearly at a glance. Jiang Pingji accepted his compliment, and the smile on her lips deepened. But what's this little flag? Xianxia picked up the small flag that had fallen to the side. There was a big head of a black and white iron-eating beast drawn on it. After looking at it for a long time, he still felt that it looked very demonic. I plan to use it as a battle flag or clan emblem in the future. Jiang Pingji seemed to have slipped her tongue. She coughed awkwardly and abruptly changed the topic. Don't you think this flag is very recognizable? There are so many people with the surname Lu in the world. If one day a feudal lord with the same surname pops out and the two families face each other in battle, with the word Lu written on their banners, whoever has the ugliest handwriting will be embarrassed. Xianxia narrowed his eyes slightly. He did not care about what Jiang Pingji said in the second half of her sentence. He only cared about the first half. There was nothing wrong with using it as a war flag. My lord could use whatever pattern she liked, but this clan emblem, changing the clan emblem was a huge matter for the clan. Even the clan leader did not have full authority to make the decision. Although the lord was born in the Lu family, she had almost no connection with the Lu family. Over the years she had not been on good terms with the Lu family in Hejian. Therefore, if she wanted to change the emblem, there was only one possibility. Set up their own clan. For example, the Wei family of Langjia was a branch of the Wei family of Zhongzhao's Bianzhou. Although the two had the same ancestor, they were two different families. If the lord also intends to become independent from the Lu family and cut off all ties with the Lu family in Hejian County, Xianxia felt a chill in his heart. Recalling the conversation he had with Wei Ci not long ago, he sighed slightly. Is my lord planning to completely cut ties with the landowning households and cut off the possibility of her relatives interfering? Jiang Pingji had just drawn two small flags, but Xianxia had already filled in a bunch of truths. No, Xianxia came to his senses and the corners of his eyes twitched uncontrollably. Master, do you really intend to use this thing as... Xianxia swallowed the rest of his words. Isn't it good? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, I drew it according to the iron-eating beast beside Zixiao. Do you think it's similar? Qiyu used the iron-eating beast army to fight against the emperor, and the ancient trump card army used it as a war banner. Isn't it too much for me to imitate the wise men of the past? Jiang Pingji drew a cartoonish version of an iron-eating beast. It had a big face and baby fat on its cheeks. If it weren't for the obvious black and white color scheme, no one would be able to recognize the creature on the flag that had been punched twice. In ancient times, people paid particular attention to freehand brushwork and cartoonish style. I can't accept this Amway. Xianxia resisted the urge to complain and said, Zixiao is good at calligraphy and painting. Why don't you let him help to polish the design of the flag? She believed that with Wei Ci's skillful hands he would definitely be able to salvage the situation. Jiang Pingji replied without raising her head, what you said makes sense. Zixiao's painting skills are indeed not bad. She took out a blank flag, wrote the word Huang on it and stuck it in Qinzhou on the sand table. Occasionally Xianxia would help out by grinding the ink and passing a small pair of scissors. Not long after, the other territories on the sand table were marked with small flags. One day I will make the entire sand table have only my flag left. Jiang Pingji bent her finger and flicked the small flag that was stuck in Zhou County. The word Su was written on it. She didn't use much strength, but the small flag was too light. It fell with a light flick. Jiang Pingji took out her iron-eating beast flag. Just like this. She flicked away the small flag with the word Su, and stuck her iron-eating beast flag on it. Xianxia looked at her hand in amazement. Her slender fingers released the iron-eating beast flag. In a trance, he seemed to see scenes of a powerful army flashing before his eyes. His ears were filled with the sounds of killing and shouting. Was this the lord's next move? Attacking the Su family? It was indeed a plastic sibling relationship. Su Pei would occasionally ask about the lord's recent situation, but he didn't expect his lord to turn around and stab him. This stab was aimed at the other party's heart. The Su family can't be underestimated, Xianxia said. Su Pei occupies Zhou County, Hu County and half of Zhangzhou. His family is rich. With Shi County as his base, Su Pei had already swallowed up Hu County. He even stabbed his neighbor Yang Tao in the dark and snatched half of Zhangzhou. If Yang Tao hadn't expanded his influence towards Nanxing, Yang Tao would definitely fight Su Pei to the death if Su Pei snatched half of Zhangzhou from him. His cousin Su Fei, who was initially evenly matched with Su Pei, was now hiding in a small place, struggling at death's door. Yang Si and Su Pei had been dealing with each other for a few years, so he knew him well. It's precisely because of this that I chose him. Jiang Pingji smiled. I originally wanted to attack Bogeo, but the only conflict has been resolved. I can't find a reason to attack him now. Apart from that, if I attack him, the defense line at the borders will be under great pressure. It'll also give the hidden enemy a good opportunity to launch a sneak attack. The gains don't make up for the losses. It's better to let him go first. Yang Si nodded. Indeed. It's not good to attack Magistrate Huang now. Jiang Pingji said, Bogeo can't, but Su Pei can. Yang Si asked, but what's the reason? What did it mean to attack with a good reason? There must be a legitimate reason to attack. In Jiang Pingji's case, the word legitimate could be removed as long as there was a reason. In times of emergency, it was fine even if there wasn't a reason. Tell me, if Su Fei asks us for help, should we send troops? The smile on Jiang Pingji's lips deepened. The words that came out of her mouth made Yang Si shudder. Su Fei and I have an old friendship since we participated in the Huangshui conference together. I can't just leave him in the lurch. Yang Si was speechless. Su Pei and my lord also have an old friendship since they participated in the alliance. You've even been allies for quite a while. Using such a reason to fall out with Su Pei, Yang Si could already imagine the scene of Su Pei vomiting blood, tossing her aside after using her. His lord had the potential to be a scumbag. Because of her outstanding ability to handle matters, Yang Si, Qing Jing, and Yesun quickly completed the paperwork. Next, they only had to exchange territories to govern. Huang Song moved all his people and belongings away. Jiang Pingji also set up an ambush and ordered the garrison troops to withdraw from Qinzhou. This was already a win-win situation. Everyone had something to gain. Therefore, this farewell meal could be considered to be quite enjoyable. Jiang Pingji and Huang Song were in high spirits. The two of them even laughed and reminisced about the past. It was obvious that they had crossed swords several times. It wasn't the first time that they had hurt each other's hearts, but their relationship was still as strong as ever. The viewers in the livestream room had the deepest feelings. From Jiang Pingji's perspective, they had seen her scheme against Huang Song more than once. Of course, Huang Song had also schemed against Jiang Pingji many times. The two of them had already shed all pretense of cordiality. Now they could still pretend that nothing had happened and restore their strong relationship as sworn brothers. Hee. Their expressions changed as quickly as a tornado. Chapter 1103. Ziyi's Crystal. Hee. After seeing the fake friendship between the host and Huang Song, I no longer believe in friendship. Liang, if a real-life friend stabbed me in the back, I would definitely break off the friendship. I really don't understand how the streamer and Huang Song can continue to be friends without any ill feelings. Perhaps this was why the host could handle the ancient times with ease, while the baby could only transmigrate once. Fantasy Purple Star Fall. Of course it's for benefits. Wuxia Nongying. Of course it's to maintain the connection so that I can stab you back next time. #funny. Overbearing President Li Guangzai. Two nests of drama queens having a meeting. I feel like the whole world is hostile towards me after watching too much of it. Through the live stream, the audience saw the various expressions of the people in the tent and felt complicated. These people had ulterior motives and concealed daggers in their smiles. Other than themselves, no one could guess what their black hearts were plotting. Pure angel Zhou Qiluo. Sigh, I feel that the host's dark side is getting higher and higher. Tudu Feichio. I'm the first person to follow the live stream. I can say with confidence that the host's character has never been in vain. Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen with the corner of her eye, and her eyes were filled with a faint smile. From an outsider's point of view, she glanced at the people under the tent and nodded and smiled in Yesun's direction, like a warm spring flower blooming. In the past, Huang Song wouldn't have thought much of this, but it was different now. Lanting admires Qingyun very much. Huang Song sighed with emotion in a low voice. It was rather noisy in the tent. He deliberately lowered his voice so that only Jiang Pingji could hear him. Jiang Pingji was startled for a moment. She seemed to be awakened by Huang Song's voice, and she forced herself to come back to her senses. Are you sincere? No matter what, he's still she's cousin, so it's hard not to feel closer to him. Bogeo, don't think too much. Huang Song said, I'm not thinking too much, but he felt a little suffocated. Once the seed of doubt sprouted, it would be difficult to remove it. Just like how a broken mirror would leave behind a crack that could not be ignored, digging out a germinating seed would also leave behind a shallow pit. With Yuan Exin, a foreign relative who loved to snitch, by Huang Song's side, it would be difficult for Nyesun to be a lone official. Jiang Pingji saw that Huang Song's expression was a little strange. Her smile deepened. There was a grudge between Huang Song and Nyesun, but it was not enough for them to turn against each other. She was not anxious. However, Feng Jin and Feng Ju made her a little disappointed. If they could use Feng Jin to provoke a crisis of trust between Feng Ju and Huang Song, it would be the highlight of the year. However, Feng Jin said, Your Highness, the same move can only be used once. Meng Heng had already made Huang Song suspect Nyesun. If the same thing happened to Feng Ju, Huang Song would not fall for it at all. Not only that, but he would also wake up in time and eliminate his suspicions towards Nyesun. In this way, Jiang Pingji's side had lost everything. Her previous efforts were in vain. Huai Lei is very wary. This kind of sowing discord is useless against him. Feng Jin knew his brother very well. He said, his friendship with Huang Song is not ordinary. Ordinary sowing of discord will not affect their relationship. The reason why Nyesun is in Zhongzhou is because Huang Song doesn't trust him enough. If Nyesun heard Feng Jin's words, he would probably feel hurt. After the banquet, Huang Song started to get busy. The 2 counties of Zhongzhou had been transferred to Jiang Pingji. This was her territory. As an outsider, Huang Song naturally could not stay for long. More importantly, he needed to go to Qinzhou to clean up the mess. He did not have extra time to waste here. Sergio, I remember that your wife is still in Huda County of Haozhou, right? Jiang Pingji keenly noticed that Meng Heng's mood was a little off. She thought for a while and found the key point. Meng Heng said, Your Highness did not remember wrongly. My wife is pregnant and it is not suitable for her to travel with the army. Therefore she is temporarily left in Huda County. The relationship between Jiang Pingji and Huang Song looked firm on the surface, but it was full of cracks on the inside. No one knew when they would completely break up. Meng Heng was worried about his wife's safety, but he did not want to add to Jiang Pingji's worries, so he could only suppress his emotions. Now that she had seen through him, Meng Heng naturally would not hide it. He directly told her the truth. So that's how it is. I was negligent. Jiang Pingji's smile was a little vexed. She revealed her canine teeth, which was a little cute. If my cousin-in-law stays in Haozhou, she will inevitably disturb Bogeo. Taking advantage of the fact that she is still young and the war has been settled, I will send a team to follow you to fetch her back. I'll mention this to Bogeo in case he forgets and wastes time. The relationship between Jiang Pingji and Huang Song was more subtle. If it was delayed for too long, Huang Song would probably find a lot of reasons to detain Meng Heng's wife and child. Jiang Pingji could not give Huang Song an excuse to make things difficult for her. On the contrary, she wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to make things difficult for Huang Song. After all, Meng Heng's wife and Nyesun's wife lived together. Meng Heng could not avoid Nyesun when he picked up his wife. On the other end, Meng Heng heard Jiang Pingji's arrangements and breathed a long sigh of relief. Yes. The Meng family in Zhongzhou was destroyed. This led to another major reshuffle of the forces in Dongqing. Jiang Pingji's territory had gained another province. After experiencing the baptism of war and the disaster of the Meng family, Zhongzhou was in full swing. Jiang Pingji still had enough manpower on hand, so she did not borrow people from Wanzhou for the time being. Yang Si saw that the situation was not good, so he escaped. He still had a heavy responsibility to manage the evacuation of the garrison troops in Qinzhou. He was very busy. Before escaping, Yang Si also took Dian Yen with him in the spirit of brotherhood. The honest Dian Yen shed tears of gratitude. Ever since he learned to be cultured, he was used by his lord as a half-cultured person. Only God knew that he was only interested in military books and strategies. The two of them could find an excuse to slip away, but the others were not so lucky. It had become a habit to work overtime after every war. Before Huang Song left, he took with him almost all the aristocratic families in Zhangzhou and Zhangzhou counties. When the wealthy aristocratic families left, they naturally took with them most of the money, grain, and officials of all sizes. Zhangzhou was now poor. There were only countless starving people waiting for Jiang Pingji to feed them. She was the best at rebuilding after war. She had accumulated enough experience in the past, so it was not difficult to operate now. As long as they worked together to get through the most difficult half a year, Zhangzhou would return to a state of prosperity when they reclaimed wastelands and harvested the next year. Of course, the blueprint was beautiful. Behind the blueprint was the hard work of Feng Zhen, Wei Xi, Feng Jin, and the others day and night. The only way to relieve my worries is to stroke the cat. Feng Zhen stroked Wei Xi's pet when he had nothing to do. The pressure of working overtime was reduced. Fortunately, the cat was still young. If it was older, it would slap the unruly people who offended it with its paw. I heard that the envoy from the Yi family of Beiyuan was summoned back as soon as he arrived at Yumen Pass. Wei Xi held the brush with both hands and multitasked. He had to deal with 2 bamboo slips and endure Feng Zhen's noise at the same time. Chapter 1104. I really realized that Zixiao never seemed to worry about Beiyuan. Feng Zhen narrowed his eyes and rubbed the iron-eating beast's ear with his large palm. He seemed to have asked casually. Or perhaps, Zixiao is certain that the Beiyuan Yi clan will not be able to free themselves, and this is also the result of your stargazing day and night? Only then did Wei Xi raise his head from the pile of bamboo slips, but he did not put down the brush in his hand. Feng Zhen stared closely at his face, as if unwilling to let go of even the slightest hint of abnormality. Wei Xi said with a calm expression, Confucius said that the mysteries of heaven must not be revealed. Feng Zhen, if Confucius was alive, wouldn't he be angered to death by Wei Xi? When did I ever say such a thing? Only Daoists talk about the secrets of the heavens. Feng Zhen wished he could throw the iron-eating beast in his arms at Wei Xi's face. This person was getting more and more infuriating. Little did they know that Wei Xi could not reveal anything at all. He could only be vague about it. Beiyuan is a very interesting country. Feng Zhen's face was blank. Interesting? How was it interesting? Little did they know that Wei Xi's evaluation of Beiyuan was straight to the point. This country was really too weird. The destruction of Beiyuan was not caused by the lord or the other feudal vassals, but by them. In his previous life, Wei Xi lived in seclusion in Zhongzhou's Bianzhou. His body was in the land of peach blossom, but his heart was in the secular world. He could not let go of the general situation of the world. Among the 5 countries in the world, Dongqing, Nanxing, and Zhongzhou, these 3 countries were fighting in full swing. All the feudal princes took turns to sing. After His Majesty united the 3 magnates, she dealt with Beiyuan and Xichang. It took more than 10 years to unify the 3 kingdoms, but it took less than a year to deal with Beiyuan and Xichang. It was not because His Majesty was too strong, but because the internal situation of the 2 countries was too strange. Let's start with Xichang. Xichang had the weakest military strength and the smallest territory among the 5 countries. Chaos descended and the 5 countries collapsed. Xichang, the weakest of the 5 countries, had leaped to become the country with the most feudal vassals in its territory and the most tragic sacrifices in war. According to incomplete statistics, there were no less than 300 uprisings in Xichang, and there were no less than 100 feudal vassals with their own names. As for the Xichang royal family, they were so poor that even the emperor had to farm in the fields. The empress plowed and knitted to earn her allowance, and the former concubines were sold into the brothel to earn money. The most powerful vassal within the territory only governed half a province, while the smallest vassal only had a village. That's right, a village. He dared to call himself a feudal lord when he had hundreds of commoners under his command. Xichang died because its forces were scattered and its people were not united. His Majesty's armored cavalry rampaged and took over Xichang in 4 months. It was as brittle as paper. These words came from the mouth of Fu Wang, the commander-in-chief of the expedition against Xichang. What was the most amusing thing? After Xichang was destroyed, Fu Wang captured the members of Xichang's royal family. The emperor actually offered his 3 sons to His Majesty as his male pets. Although these 3 sons of mine are young, they are all well-educated and well-mannered. I don't dare to compare my looks and temperament to the nobles of the aristocratic families, but my ancestor was once part of the royal family of the great Xia dynasty. Their bloodline is noble. Before the three of them fell from grace, they were famous in the capital. In front of all the officials in the imperial court, this ruler of a fallen country was servile and obsequious. He even used vulgar language. Wuxia was so angry that he could not eat for a few days. His Majesty's dragon body is precious. How dare such a lowly person covet it? The hot-tempered General Dian Yen couldn't take it anymore, and with a kick he dislocated the man's shoulder. If it wasn't for Fu Wang, Li Yun and the rest stopping him to prevent Dian Yen from killing people in court, this fellow would have long gone to hell. In the end, His Majesty only smiled and fined Dian Yen half a month's salary, then rewarded him with a box of gold, silver and jewels. His Majesty originally wanted the descendants of the Xichang royal family to be wealthy commoners, but after this incident they were all wiped out. Beiyuan's national power was stronger than Xichang's, but His Majesty took less time to recover Beiyuan than Xichang. Beiyuan was famous for courting disaster, and it could be said to be a weirdo among the 5 countries. Before the collapse of the 5 countries, the Beiyuan royal family was already in decline. Basically, a few aristocratic families took turns to rule, constantly fighting for power. After the collapse, power struggles became more frequent. Within a year there were no less than 20 coups, the shortest lasting only half a day. The Yi family had the last laugh. They destroyed the royal family, wore the dragon robes and ascended the throne. Almost every direct descendant of the Yi family was conferred the title of prince, and their salary was the highest. They were prominent for a while, and it could not be said that they weren't prestigious. However, this situation didn't last long. Beiyuan quickly fell into chaos. Previously, Feng Zhen had mentioned that Beiyuan was located in the north. In a year it was only warm for a few months and the rest of the year was very cold. The environment was harsh and it was difficult for crops to survive. The land produced little food. In order to stabilize the situation, Beiyuan's agricultural tax was naturally the lowest among the 5 countries. The government only collected 20% of the agricultural tax. In this era, this agricultural tax was already very low, but the people were still hovering around the line of food and clothing. Turning to the Yi family, after the emperor ascended the throne, he conferred dozens of princes and dukes, and the salary expenditure was extremely terrifying. The national treasury couldn't support it anymore and began to default on the salary. All the princes and dukes were in a mess. In order to appease the people, they had to increase the agricultural tax and set up miscellaneous tax collection programs to increase the national treasury's income and distribute the princes' salaries. When the tax was at its heaviest, the government even collected 90% of the agricultural tax, and the remaining 10% of the grain tax had to be exploited layer by layer. Within the borders of Beiyuan, countless people froze and starved to death. Hearing that His Majesty's iron hooves were about to enter the country, the people from all over the country spontaneously took action. Some opened the passes, some opened the city gates, and some opened the city gates. The soldiers guarding the border fortresses ran away without a trace. If Xichang was as fragile as paper, then Beiyuan was probably as fragile as air. Calculating the time, the Yi family was now fighting with a few other aristocratic families for power. The regime changed like the sun and moon, and the coups were so frequent that they seemed like a joke. The Yi family coveted the Zhangzhou stud farm, but if they kicked an iron plate, they couldn't really send a large number of troops to suppress the border. Wuxia knew this, but he didn't dare to take the risk. After all, Beiyuan was still considered strong, and hadn't been as fragile as air by the Yi family. Wuxia wasn't the least bit surprised to hear that the envoy from Beiyuan's Yi family was summoned back as soon as he arrived at Yumen Pass. Wuxia's calmness attracted Feng Zhen's attention, which was why he tested him just now. Little did he know that Wuxia was an old cucumber that had been dipped in green paint. He was a licensed driver with decades of experience, so why would he be tricked by him? I heard from the Lord that her next step is to make a move on Su Bei. Zixiao, don't you think this is too rash? How is it rash? Feng Zhen said as he stroked the cat. Su Bei is indebted to the Lord. If she doesn't handle this well, I'm afraid she'll be criticized by others. If Jiang Pingji really accepted Su Fei's request for help and used this reason to confront the Su and Pei armies, wouldn't she be criticized? During the alliance meeting at Huangshui, Su Bei had supported Jiang Pingji. This bond was much deeper than Su Fei's. Wuxi's eyes contained a smile. If Su Bei can't restrain himself first, then he can't blame the Lord for not remembering our past relationship. Feng Zhen's expression froze. How could he have forgotten? What was his lord best at? Creating trouble. Chapter 1105. According to Meng Zhan's calculations before his death, Jiang Pingji should be controlled by the Yi family of Beiyuan and the Nye family of Zhongzhou. But man proposes, God disposes. Nye Liang was plotted against and returned to Zhongzhou without achieving his goal. The enemies of the Yi family of Beiyuan got wind of it and seized the opportunity to seize power. In order to keep their power, the Yi family had to temporarily put aside their desire for Zhongzhou and focus on the internal conflict. The two biggest threats from the outside world disappeared. The danger of being besieged on all sides was reduced by half. The situation seemed good, but it did not mean that Jiang Pingji was safe. At the border of Zhongzhou's Bianzhou, Wei Yong rode a tall horse and followed the carriage. Other than the footsteps of the guards, the clashing of weapons and the rolling of the carriage wheels, he could only hear intermittent coughing from the other end of the carriage. It was as if he was coughing out his heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. After a long while, the coughing finally subsided. Zixuan, when can we enter Bianzhou? Lifting the curtain made of green bamboo, the lower half of Nye Liang's face was revealed. His thin lips were pale and his cheeks were so thin that they were slightly sunken in. Although it was discovered in time, Nye Liang's body was injured. Half a month ago he had a headache, fever and coughing. His mind had become hazy. He had improved in the past few days but he still looked ill. If not for Wei Xi's careful instructions before he left, Wei Yong would have thought that someone had poisoned Nye Liang again. Looking at the speed, we are 2 hours away from the nearest relay station in Bianzhou. Nye Liang was blown by the wind and the carriage jolted twice. It irritated his throat and made him cough violently while holding onto the window frame. Wei Yong said, Guangshan, don't talk. Calm your mind and rest. When we reach Bianzhou there will be another tough battle. The mission given to Nye Liang by the Nye family was to fight for Zhongzhou, even if it was only Meng County. If Nye Liang returned empty-handed he would definitely be reprimanded by the clan elders. The power within the Nye family was complicated and each branch fought with each other. As the most promising heir of the fifth branch of the Nye family, Nye Liang's existence was the most important bargaining chip of the fifth branch. Now that Nye Liang had returned in failure, the Nye clan elders would also doubt his ability. Wei Yong could not help but feel sorry for him. We should stay in Zhongzhou for a little longer. Regardless of the size of the territory, as long as they could fight for a piece of land, it would be easier to explain to the Nye clan. However, Nye Liang insisted on returning empty-handed. Wasn't that putting himself in a dead end? Wei Yong thought of Nye Liang's current situation and felt powerless. It's useless to stay here any longer. Nye Liang said in a weak voice. Huang Song and Lu Shi would rather maintain a fake alliance than fall out with each other. It's obvious that they know very well that the Nye family will benefit from their internal strife. Both of them were smart people. Even if they couldn't help it, the people around them would tell them all kinds of benefits. The Meng family only sent envoys but did not station any troops in Zhanjiang Pass. Their deterrent power was far from enough. They can afford to delay, but Liang's body can't. The Nye family of Zhongzhou had a strong military force, but there was a difference between sending envoys to threaten them verbally and sending troops to the border to threaten them. Sending an emissary was just a verbal warning, while stationing troops to threaten the other party was to place a steel knife on the other party's neck, threatening the other party with their lives. Huang Song and Jiang Pingji were like dead pigs that were not afraid of boiling water. The former tried to smooth things over and feigned ignorance, while the latter was shrewd, cunning, and full of evil tricks. Moreover, Lu Shi would rather start a war than give up his territory. This diplomatic mission is destined to be fruitless. Compared to this, Nye Liang was more worried about the Nye family. The internal strife within the family was destined to not prosper for long. This time they poisoned him. Would they send killers to assassinate other competitors next time? In troubled times, only by being of one mind and united as a rope could they have a foothold. If the vermin of the Nye family were not dealt with, the Nye family would not perish at the hands of the enemy, but they would die by themselves. To resist external aggression we must first pacify the internal. Nye Liang said, if those vermin are stubborn. His tone became cold. His thin face was hidden in the shadows, giving people an inexplicably cold and terrifying feeling. Wei Yong sighed. Even so, I'm afraid I'll regret it in the future if I miss this opportunity. Niao Yang asked, "What do you mean?" Wei Yong said, "Zixiao has always been stubborn and opinionated. He has been different from ordinary people since he was young. I've heard of his ambition, to unify the world and bring peace to the four seas. If he didn't see this potential in Lu Shi, he wouldn't have truly become an official to assist him." Looking at Jiang Pingji's experience, she had been through endless trials and tribulations, but she was able to overcome them and never stopped. Meng Zhan took great pains to set up a trap and led her into a situation where she was surrounded by enemies on all sides. What was the result? Jiang Pingji sent someone to leak information to the political enemies of the Yi family in Beiyuan, using this to restrain the Yi family. Niao Yang was busy rushing back to Zhongzhou to deal with the internal affairs of the Nye family, so he couldn't pose a sufficient threat. Without the Nye family as a counterweight, Huang Song was tricked into handing over the 2 counties of Zhongzhou. The original disadvantage was turned around. Although the Nye family and the Yi family wouldn't let go of Zhongzhou easily and would come back after a while, it gave her a chance to breathe. Wei Yong was sure that Jiang Pingji would definitely use this time to fight for more bargaining chips for herself. She's a strong opponent. Niao Yang smiled faintly. But Liang won't regret it. He would only regret it if he allowed the Nye family to court disaster. Within Hu County, Su Fei's life had been difficult these years. Back in the day, he was the eldest grandson that his grandfather doted on the most. He relied on this favor to fight evenly with his eldest grandson Su Bei. Because of his grandfather's protection, Su Fei had the upper hand most of the time. However, everything changed after the political chaos in Dongqing and the alliance meeting at Huangshui. First, his grandfather passed away and Su Fei lost his powerful protection. The elders of the Su family were inclined to appoint the eldest son, which made Su Fei very angry. Ever since he was young, he liked to compete with his cousin. He couldn't tolerate being inferior to his cousin. Because of the fight for the head of the family, the 2 brothers completely broke off. The internal power of the Su family was also divided into 2 groups. In the beginning, the 2 brothers were evenly matched. Su Fei and Su Bei even joined forces to swallow up the territory of the county chief of Hu County Wumashang. However, this balance was broken after Jiang Pingji went on a northern expedition to the northern borderline and Yang Si represented her in forming an alliance with Su Bei. The balance gradually tilted. While other people's lives became more and more prosperous, Su Fei's days became more and more sullen. As Su Bei pressed on, Su Fei also lost most of his territory and gradually holed up in a small area. Seeing that he couldn't hold on any longer, Su Fei's emotions became more and more violent. He often vented his anger on the servants and maidservants around him. The aristocratic families that were originally attached to him gradually changed sides and left. His subordinates even persuaded him to submit to Su Bei and submit to him. How could this be possible? Apart from age, how is he stronger than me? Grandfather has always favored me to be the head of the family. What does Su Bei count for? Not only did he not act according to grandfather's will, but he also wants to put me to death, to make me submit to him? Dream on. If he wasn't willing to submit or die, then he could only seek help from a third party. Just as Su Fei was frowning in distress, a servant beside him gave him an idea that made him suddenly see the light. My lord, if we are looking for military support, it won't do if they are too weak. If they are too strong, distant waters won't be able to put out a nearby fire. After thinking about it, only the Wanzhou magistrate Lu Shi is the most suitable. Chapter 1106. The servant saw that Su Fei's expression was not good and felt uneasy. Lale oi. He also cherished his life. Su Fei's servants had died one after another. Seeing that it was his turn soon, he had no choice but to find a way out. If he did not do this, he would not be able to escape death. Just as he was at his wit's end, he had heard of this brilliant idea from someone nearby and hurriedly presented it to Su Fei. Su Fei said gloomily, Lu Shi is indeed suitable, but I have no friendship with him. The servant was delighted when he heard this. He had his own selfish motives and his little plan was brilliant. It would be best if Su Fei could successfully escape danger. That way he would be a meritorious contributor. If he could not escape danger, at least he could delay for a while. He could secretly find someone to open up a channel and transfer him away from Su Fei's side. How could Laoi not be friends with Lu Prefecture's magistrate? The servant carefully served. Thinking back to the Huang River Conference, Laoi and Lu Prefecture's magistrate fought side by side. We could be considered comrades. Not to mention anything else, just because of this old friendship she can't just watch him die, right? The servant thought that he had spoken well, but Su Fei's expression was even uglier than before. He was anxious, afraid that he had stepped on a landmine. Su Fei said after a long pause, "You might not know this, but during the Huang River Conference Lu Shi was closer to Su Pei. Although the two were scheming for their own interests, Su Bei had supported Lu Shi during the Huang River Conference. This was an indisputable fact. In terms of friendship, it was not Su Fei's turn. The servant was dumbfounded. Had he come up with a rotten idea? Su Fei said in a gloomy tone, "But you also reminded me that Lu Shi is a good candidate. Although the chances are not high, it's better than squatting here and waiting to be captured. No matter what, I will not admit defeat to Su Bei even if I have to give it my all." Seeing this, the servant shivered involuntarily. He did not understand. Su Fei and Su Bei were cousins from the same sect. They should have a good relationship. How did things end up like this? Little did he know that because of his grandfather's favoritism and protection, defeating Su Bei had become Su Fei's obsession. Su Fei could lose to anyone but not Su Bei. They were born to fight. Only when one of them fell would it truly end. "Go call Qin Gong over." As soon as Su Fei finished speaking, she immediately changed her words. "Wait. Go and prepare a cinnabar brush and ink for me first, then go and call Qin Gong. Do this secretly and don't let the news leak out. Otherwise I won't let you off." The servant was so scared that he was sweating profusely and his back was covered in cold sweat. "Yes, I'll do it right away." The servant tiptoed to the study to find a cinnabar brush and ink, wondering why Su Fei wanted cinnabar. Su Fei spread out a roll of bamboo slips and placed it on the table. Then he pulled out a dagger and cut his palm. Hot blood dripped onto the inkstone. After bleeding enough, Su Fei's expression didn't change as he fetched some cinnabar and mixed it with the blood. He then used his uninjured hand to grind the ink. Was he going to write a blood letter? The servant's eyelids twitched and he retreated while trembling. Su Fei dipped his brush into the ink and wrote a letter to Jiang Pingji with a gloomy face. He was well liked by old Master Su. Other than fighting cute ghosts, his talent was also a plus. His grandfather had taught him how to write, and his initiation was also done by him. In comparison, Su Bei, whose literary talent wasn't much, seemed mediocre. Su Fei had never thought that the words and books he had painstakingly learned for so many years would one day be used to write a blood letter and gain the sympathy of others. In another place, the servant took Su Fei's warrant to look for Qin Gong. "Young General Qin, old master is looking for you." Qin Gong had just returned from training at the military field. His youthful face was tense as if his entire body was on guard. Seeing this, the servant felt pity in his heart. Qin Gong was the youngest son of Qin Gu, the first general under Su Fei's command. In order to show his loyalty to Su Fei, Qin Gu led his troops and fought for time to retreat. However, he was pierced through the heart by thousands of arrows and died without a complete corpse. Qin Ji's eldest and second sons also died in the following battles. The Qin family was full of loyal warriors and now only Qin Gong was left. The servant remembered that Qin Gong used to be a young man with some baby fat and loved to smile. Ever since he took over the heavy responsibility from his father and brother, he had become increasingly cold and stern. Following the wishes of his father and brother, he was also loyal and devoted to Su Fei. He trained the troops day and night, never slacking off. Suddenly, the servant had a bad premonition. He had a feeling that Su Fei calling for Qin Gong was probably not a good thing. When Qin Gong saw Su Fei's warrant, it was as if Su Fei was right in front of him. He said respectfully, "Yes, this general will go over now." When Qin Gong went over, he acutely smelled a faint smell of blood in the air. Very quickly, his gaze sharpened as he discovered the source of the smell. "My lord," Su Fei comforted him. "It's nothing. Sit down first. I have something to tell you." When Qin Gong heard that there was something important to tell him, he didn't dare to sit down. He immediately said, "This general obeys your order." Su Fei wasn't surprised. Qin Gong's temperament was like his father's. When he was young, he was naive and straightforward. Once he shouldered heavy responsibilities, he would quickly mature. "Deliver this letter to Wanzhou magistrate Lu Shi at night," Su Fei said. "Remember to be careful. Don't let anyone discover it. Qin Gong looked up in surprise and blurted out, "If this general leaves, who will train the soldiers to protect the Lord's safety?" Su Fei laughed. "My life isn't something you can protect just by training the soldiers to defend it." Qin Gong's face was deathly pale. He pursed his lips tightly. "Only this letter can bring me a glimmer of hope." Su Fei tied the 2 rolls of bamboo slips and put them into a tube bag. He personally handed them to Qin Gong. "I've let your father and your 2 brothers down. Well, Sai, you must personally deliver this letter to Lu Shi. The sooner the better. This general obeys your order. I vow to complete the Lord's entrustment with my life." Su Fei smiled faintly. "Go. I'll wait for your good news." Qin Gong lowered his gaze and saw a white cloth wrapped around Su Fei's left palm. There were faint traces of blood on it. His heart sank. Yes. Qin Gong put the tube bag containing the 2 secret letters into his lapel. Under the cover of his armor, he left Su Fei's mansion with a normal expression. When he returned to the mansion, he secretly ordered people to prepare a few days' worth of dry rations and a bag of silver fragments. He also found a few sets of ordinary, clean clothes and packed them into a bag. In the middle of the night, a vigorous figure sneaked out of the city. In order not to attract the attention of the enemy soldiers, Qin Gong traversed mountains and ridges, choosing remote and uninhabited roads. When Qin Gong finally arrived in Wanzhou, more than a month had passed. It was midsummer. Qin Gong squatted outside a tea house. He held a cracked pottery bowl and greedily drank the entire bowl of coarse tea. After drinking enough, he even fed some to the horses that were on their way. "Pretty boy, look over here." At first, Qin Gong didn't realize that the voice was calling him. It wasn't until someone followed him and the shadow blocked his line of sight. Chapter 1107. "What did you call me for, young lady?" Qin Gong asked in the elegant language of the 5 kingdoms. The young lady in front of him was a delicate and pretty village girl. Although her appearance was not outstanding, she had the unique vitality of her age and her cheeks were healthy. She wore a pink robe with a short-sleeved blouse over her head and a long skirt with embroidery. The fabric of her clothes was not exquisite, but the colors were bright, which made people's eyes light up. Just from her clothes, it could be seen that the young lady's family was wealthy and had a good quality of life. Now that the world was in chaos, many families only had one set of clothes to go out in, not to mention dressing so respectfully. The delicate and pretty village girl smiled. "Young man, do you have a marriage partner?" Qin Gong's face stiffened and his cheeks flushed as he answered dryly. "My late father has already arranged a marriage for me." When the village girl heard this, her face darkened and she walked away resentfully. A farmer drinking tea in a tea stall slapped his thigh and laughed. "That's the prettiest girl in our village. Young man, you're not that lucky." Qin Gong's face turned red from the teasing. Who knew what the situation in Wanzhou was like? Qin Gong was asked about his marriage by all kinds of girls and women, and all of them wanted to marry him. At first, Qin Gong was embarrassed and answered honestly that he was not married. Later, he learned his lesson and said that his late father had arranged a marriage for him. When the village girl asked him if he had a marriage partner, Qin Gong guessed what would happen next. With his sharp eyes, he noticed that the village girl had returned to the crowd and was laughing and pointing at him with her friends. He was suddenly embarrassed. "It really doesn't look like chaotic times," Qin Gong muttered. The clothes of the people on the street were bright, and even if they were patched, they were still clean. The adults looked healthy and the children playing by the side of the road were fair and cute. It was a scene of prosperity and peace. For a moment he felt that time and space were in disorder. But he did not forget his mission. He originally wanted to go straight to Zhangzhou, but halfway there he found out that Jiang Pingji had already returned from Zhangzhou to the prefecture of Shangyang, Wanzhou. Leading the old horse, Qin Gong touched his money pouch that only had a few copper coins left and sighed helplessly. He had brought quite a lot of silver with him when he set out. Logically speaking, it should be enough to cover his expenses. However, when he saw the miserable and helpless people along the way, out of pity he had to buy more food for them. Although it did not delay the journey, it was very costly. Now he was so poor that he only had a few copper coins left. After entering the city, the noisy streets and pedestrians made him look pitiful. Qin Gong smelled the aroma of food in the air. He swallowed his saliva and led the skinny horse onto the special path. The territory under Jiang Pingji's rule had special rules. Pedestrians, horses, and carriages had to take different roads. There were even special bailiffs to manage them. After entering the city, no one is allowed to gallop on a horse unless there are special circumstances. Qin Gong naturally wouldn't deliberately cause trouble in someone else's territory. Using his remaining copper coins, he bought some hay to feed the horses, 2 large cakes and a bowl of coarse tea. As he ate, he strained his ears to eavesdrop on the conversation of the customers. Qin Gong was listening attentively when a young man in wooden clogs came running in from outside. The young man had dark skin and plain facial features. His face was flushed from running. He shouted excitedly at the customers in the tea house. Saigo is going to be flogged again. The lady boss of the tea house hit the back of his head in annoyance and scolded, "You little bastard, you don't learn good things all day. What are you watching for?" The young man stomped his feet. "Mother, can't I just watch the fun?" The lady boss wanted to scold him again, but one of the customers gave the young man a copper coin. "Tell me, what's the news today?" The tea house was a place where news circulated and gossip flew everywhere. The young man was the lady boss's son. He had a mischievous temper, but he had an excellent memory. He could always tell the customers all kinds of news he had heard. Many customers liked to come here to drink tea and listen to gossip. Qin Gong was also attracted by the young man's lively words and listened attentively. "Everyone, do you know about the nursery hall?" The young man kept them guessing. The customers jeered. "In the whole of Wanzhou, who doesn't know about the nursery hall? If you keep us guessing, I won't pay for the tea." Jiang Pingji set up the nursery hall as soon as she entered Xiangyang district to take in orphans who lost their parents during the war. After that, the nursery hall became a shelter for many irresponsible parents who abandoned their children. To be precise, it was a shelter for abandoned girls. If they were war orphans, it was relatively easy to enter the nursery hall. If the parents abandoned and sold baby girls, they had to sign a strict contract. Now that 4 or 5 years had passed, the youngest of that batch of children was enlightened, and the older ones could work and support their families. The young man said, "Someone went to the nursery hall to steal a child." As soon as he finished speaking, many customers spat out their tea. "Went to the nursery hall to steal a child? Provoke the king of hell? Which blind bastard did that?" The customers discussed animatedly. The young man sat in the middle of the tea house and whetted everyone's appetite like a storyteller. "You don't know, right? The child who was stolen is a girl from class A and D of the nursery hall. Guess who stole the child?" The young man laughed. "It's actually this girl's biological parents. Today they were also the ones who were pushed to the table and spanked. 50 strokes each." The young man gestured with 5 fingers, gloating over the misfortune of others. The customers who didn't know asked, "Isn't it normal for biological parents to steal a child? Why do they have to punish them 50 strokes each?" Qin Gong, who was outside, also had this doubt. "You don't know. The children who entered the nursery hall are either orphans of martyrs, orphans whose parents died and relatives refused to take them in, or baby girls who were abandoned by their parents and elders." Another customer who lived in Xiangyang district cupped his hands and bowed in the direction of the state government. He then said, "The former is easy. If it's the latter, the elders have to sign a contract to sever ties. Once the contract is signed, the children's elders and relatives can't get close to the child. Not to mention stealing the child. Even if they see the child in private, they will be punished with 10 strokes. Hey, that's not right. Since it's a girl, why would they take the risk to steal her? A contract severed blood ties. No matter how one looked at it, the child was no longer the parents. Blood ties? This thing couldn't be compared to the contract." The young man said, "You don't know, I have a childhood friend in the Golden Scale Academy. The governor is preparing to expand the Golden Scale Academy. As for the source of students, he chose a portion from the nursery hall. That girl is from class A and D, so entering the Golden Scale Academy is a sure thing. I don't know where the parents heard the news, but they came over eagerly. The girl didn't want to acknowledge her, so they thought of stealing her. Entering the Golden Scale Academy would basically be considered as the governor's personal disciple. How could their future be bad? Even if it was a girl, she would be a golden doll who had a relationship with the governor. If they could acknowledge their daughter, it wouldn't be a loss no matter what." The tea house was in full swing. Qin Gong drank his tea, returned the pottery bowl, and followed the crowd to the food stall. When he arrived, the 50 strokes had already been flogged. The dispersed crowd was laughing and talking. Almost everyone felt that the couple deserved it. The 50 strokes were considered light. The contract to sever ties had been signed, which was equivalent to selling the child to the governor, Lu Shi, who was behind the nursery hall. The child's life and death were in Lu Shi's hands, and the child was the governor's private property. What did biological parents count for? This wasn't stealing their own child, it was clearly stealing the governor's private property. It was already merciful that they weren't beaten to death. Chapter 1108. As the crowd dispersed, Qin Gong glanced at the couple who had been beaten to the point of being bloody. With his excellent eyesight, he could tell that the couple was badly beaten, but their bones were not injured. Only their skin and flesh were bruised. It was painful, but it was not fatal. If 50 strokes of the board were to fall on a person's body, not to mention an ordinary couple, even a martial artist would lose his life. As he was thinking, Qin Gong felt someone tugging at his sleeve. He saw a 7 or 8-year-old girl standing beside him. Her hair was tied into a bun, her chubby cheeks were pink, and her eyes were clear like flawless jewels. The girl wore a blue and white scholarly robe, and an exquisite token hung on her waist. She did not look like she was raised by an ordinary family. "Why are you pulling me?" Could it be that this 7 or 8-year-old girl wanted to marry him? Qin Gong laughed involuntarily at his own imagination. The girl spoke clearly, "Little brother, please help me give these to them." Qin Gong took it and found that the things in the bags were medicine for treating external injuries. Apart from the medicine, there was also a small bag of copper coins. "Who are you to them?" Qin Gong asked curiously. The girl glanced at her parents, who were pushing the responsibility, crying and insulting her. Her calm gaze was mixed with some complexity. The nursery was divided into male and female sections. The female servants who took care of them did not hide anything from them. Many girls knew from the moment they could remember that they were abandoned by their parents. They did not have parents, but they had brothers and sisters in the nursery and the governor who protected them. Unrelated people. Qin Gong was surprised, vaguely guessing the girl's identity. He was about to sigh at the girl's filial piety when she said, "If you die here, it will inevitably damage the governor's reputation. In other words, if you die, you should at least die far away." Qin Gong, children these days were all smart. Qin Gong played the good guy for once. He threw the medicine and the bag of coins to the couple. "You're the child from the nursery?" Qin Gong returned to find the girl still in the same place. The girl nodded, then shook her head. She pointed at the token hanging on her waist and proudly puffed out her flat chest. "I'm a student of the Golden Scale Academy now." The nursery imitated the Golden Scale Academy in setting up 2 sections for males and females. Apart from studying, males and females were separated for other activities. The girl was a Class D student, and her grades were second only to Class A. This time, the Golden Scale Academy expanded its enrollment, and there were a total of 300 more places. The infant nurturing hall was fortunate enough to occupy 50 places, and the little girl relied on her own abilities to take one of the places. That day she packed her things and moved to the Golden Scale Academy. Halfway through her journey, her things were stolen by this pair of parents. She was almost scared to death. After calming down, she dealt with the parents while trying to find a good opportunity to escape. It was this experience that completely cut off her desire for the word parent. What did they mean when they said that if she was filial to them and helped her younger brother and older brother, they would find a good marriage for her in the future? What did he mean by saying that they were the ones who treated her the best in the world, yet he was secretly slandering the prefecture overseer? If he really treated her well, would he have sold her to the nursery? After the girl learned to read, she looked at the record of her parents selling her to the nursery. The record described in detail the process of her parents selling her to the nursery, including her words and actions, expressions, and the reason for selling her. Did they really think she was illiterate and didn't know anything? Judging from your accent, you don't seem to be a local of Xiangyang district. But you speak elegant words so well, you shouldn't be an ordinary person, right? Elegant words were official language. Many people spoke official language with a local accent. Unless they had studied it seriously and systematically, it would be difficult to speak so accurately. Qin Gong was secretly surprised. The little girl in front of him was actually testing him? Sure enough, she had become a spirit. "I'm from a foreign place. I'm here to look for someone," Qin Gong said. "I'm looking for the registrar of Wanzhou, Su Ku." Except for Su Ku, the chief butler, who was a fixed NPC, the others were free to do whatever they wanted. They were often dragged by Jiang Pingji to battle everywhere. If Qin Gong wanted to see Jiang Pingji, he had to find someone who could speak to her. It was not easy to find others, and Qin Gong was not sure if they were in Wanzhou, so he could only find Su Ku. The girl was shocked. "Are you a relative of Registrar Su?" Qin Gong shook his head. He said, "No, I was entrusted by someone to bring a letter to Registrar Su." Although Qin Gong was only 18 years old, he had a lot of foresight. He did not directly state his purpose. Instead, he said that he was here to deliver a letter to Su Ku. The girl said, "Look at you. I'm afraid you won't be able to see Registrar Su." How could an ordinary person meet a registrar of a province? Qin Gong laughed bitterly. He said, "I was planning to try my luck. Maybe the gatekeeper would be willing to help me deliver a message." Of course, the possibility of being kicked out was higher. Qin Gong had no proper documents on him other than the secret letter. He could not prove his identity. The girl thought for a while. She said, "Is the letter urgent?" Qin Gong said, "It's very urgent. I know a way. Maybe it'll be faster," the girl said. "But if you lie, you'll lose your life." The girl was now a new student at the Golden Scale Academy. She could pass a message to Feng Yi, who was a senior. Feng Yi was the son of Feng Biche. Although he was the son of an official, he was gentle and well-mannered. If what Qin Gong said was true, Feng Yi should be willing to help. Qin Gong said without changing his expression, "Of course it's true." The girl was lucky. When she arrived, Feng Yi had just finished school. "Why are you looking for me?" The girl explained the purpose of her visit. Feng Yi frowned slightly and asked about Qin Gong's behavior and appearance in detail. "I'm afraid you've been deceived. Registrar Su's family has been in Wanzhou for many years. How could there be a letter from outside?" The girl's face paled when she heard this. "But I'd like to meet this person. You've just entered the Golden Scale Academy. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me." Feng Yi got up and called for her attendant. Ever since the incident of the girl being stolen, the Golden Scale Academy and the nursery had increased their security. As the son of an official, Feng Yi's security had also increased by several levels. She was not allowed to travel alone, and she was not allowed to meet strangers alone. She had to bring 1 or 2 guards with her. Qin Gong waited at the agreed place. After a long time, he did not see the girl. Instead, he saw a handsome young man dressed in blue and white clothes. It wasn't quite accurate to call him a young man. He was between a boy and a teenager. He looked frail, had elegant features, and had an excellent temperament. As soon as he saw Feng Yi's attire, Qin Gong knew that the blue and white school uniform was the standard appearance of a student of the Golden Scale Academy. "What's your purpose in coming to Wanzhou? If you can't give me a reason, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to go to prison." Feng Yi sat down and looked straight at Qin Gong. "Don't you know that there's no one in Registrar Su's hometown? It's even more impossible for there to be any letter from home," Qin Gong asked. "And who are you?" "Feng Zhen is my father." Qin Gong's expression froze. He seemed to be doubting Feng Yi's identity. "I want to meet Registrar Su." As soon as she finished speaking, Feng Yi's gaze became a bit more fierce. Still not willing to tell the truth? Qin Gong grinned inwardly. Oh my, could it be that this teenager in front of him had also become a demon? Chapter 1109. Meet the Lu Prefecture Overseer? Who is your master? Feng Yi's eyes were slightly closed and her tone was calm. At such a young age, she already had a calm demeanor, as if she would remain unfazed even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of her. "I have to see Governor Lu first, or at least Registrar Su." Naturally, confidential matters couldn't be casually spoken of. Why should I tell a kid who's still wet behind his ears? Qin Gong was annoyed that he had been fooled by a teenager. Feng Yi was calm and collected. She looked at Qin Gong with ripples in her eyes. "You entered the city alone, so the secret letter must be on you. If you insist on not telling me, I'll throw you into prison later, and I'll naturally be able to search your body for it. Whether you say it or not is not up to you." Qin Gong almost choked on his own saliva. The child in front of him was not only a demon, but also a 1,000-year-old demon. Before Qin Gong could speak, Feng Yi continued, "Of course, if you can produce something that can prove your identity, then I'll believe you for now." First she provoked and angered him, then she comforted him gently. Feng Yi was especially good at using this method of giving a sweet date after a slap. He was not purposely making things difficult for Qin Gong. It was just that Qin Gong was acting suspiciously and his intentions were unclear. If he didn't ask clearly and Feng Yi recklessly introduced him to Su Ku and the others, what if something happened? If what Qin Gong said was true, why did he have to stammer on such a question? Logically or emotionally, Feng Yi had to understand the situation before making the next judgment. Qin Gong replied, I don't have anything on me that can prove my identity. He was afraid that he would fall into the enemy's hands and expose his identity, so other than the secret letter from Su Fei he did not bring anything else. As soon as Qin Gong finished speaking he saw Feng Yi staring at him with a faint smile. I won't say anything about this, I won't say anything about that. You say you're not a suspect, but ask yourself, do you believe it? Qin Gong's face turned red and he gritted his teeth. At this time Feng Yi stood up from her seat and made to leave. Wait, you can't go. Feng Yi turned her head and said, I won't search your secret letters. Qin Gong, I'll tell Registrar Su about your matter. Just stay in prison and wait for news. Qin Gong. He felt that he could still save them. Why was this brat in front of him so hard to deal with? How hard was it to help him bring a message? Moreover, if Feng Yi didn't bring Su Ku a message, would he have to stay in prison forever? What if we delay the Lord's important matters? Before Qin Gong could say anything, Feng Yi seemed to have seen through his doubts. I'll tell Registrar Su about this. If you really are a messenger from one of the feudal vassals, wouldn't I be held responsible for not delivering the message? Qin Gong's face turned red. Then I'll wait for your news in prison. Feng Yi smiled and nodded. Okay. Qin Gong obediently went to the cell and squatted there. Separated by the bars, he anxiously watched Feng Yi leave. Feng Yi left the prison and saw a familiar figure squatting not far away. She was shaking her head and muttering something. Listening carefully, it turned out to be the lesson that the teacher was teaching today. He laughed involuntarily and called out from afar. Chongqing, are you playing truant again? The girl in the Golden Scale Academy's female uniform heard the noise and suddenly turned her head. She ran in front of Feng Yi with small steps. I heard that you're in prison, so I came to take you out. If Uncle Feng knows that you've committed a crime and are in prison, he won't let you off easily. I'm obviously here to save the day, but you say that I'm playing truant. Chongqing added, I've asked for leave from the teacher. Feng Yi's curled lips froze for a moment. She grumpily produced a stir-fried chestnut. Do you know what false rumors mean? I only sent someone to prison. How did it become me being locked up in prison? Chongqing muttered. What did that person do wrong? A person who was personally sent to prison by Feng Yi was definitely not an ordinary person. Feng Yi briefly explained. Chongqing tilted her head and thought for a while. She blinked in confusion. Is this person's brain made of elm? You have to inform Registrar Su, but he doesn't have to stay in prison. He can stay outside and wait for news. Feng Yi could not help but laugh. His brain is indeed a bit elm, but it's also cute. From his appearance and words, I can tell that he's a martial artist. There's a faint bloody aura around him. I've only seen this kind of temperament on a few military uncles. People like that are always hot-tempered and easily angered. But facing my coaxing, not only did he not get angry, but he also obediently fell into my trap. He's unexpectedly likable. Chongqing uttered a disdainful, the young brother Feng likes to bully people more and more. He even bullies honest people. Bullying was fine, but he even coaxed people to go to prison. How much hatred was there? I've never bullied you. Feng Yi pinched Chongqing's nose. I can't even wait to coax you. It was fine for others to criticize others, but if they criticized the person in front of her, golden beans would fall. Feng Yi went to find Su Ku and sent Chongqing back to the mansion. Go back and do your homework. When I come back I'll check. If you're wrong, you'll be punished to do the martial arts squat and copy the wrong words. Chongqing pouted and muttered, This is what you said when you said you've never bullied me. It was obvious that she was the one who was bullied the most. He was stricter in her studies than her father. If she didn't do well, she would be punished to do martial arts squats and practice writing. When Su Ku heard that Feng Yi had something to see him about, he found it funny. I don't know what it is. Let him in. Registrar Su, I found a person with strange movements today. He claimed to be a messenger sent by another feudal lord. However, when I asked him who the lord behind him was, he didn't give me any details. Feng Yi told him everything about Qin Gong in a low voice without hiding anything. A trace of a smile appeared on Su Ming's solemn face. "You mischievous boy, it's his bad luck to meet you." Feng Yi said disapprovingly, "That person's martial arts skills are not low. If I don't coax him to go to prison, I'm afraid it won't be safe." "I'm afraid that someone who's willing to be coaxed to go to prison is not an evil person. After all, he couldn't do anything bad with that little bit of intelligence." Su Ku ordered someone to bring Qin Gong out of prison. Qin Gong stayed in prison for more than an hour. When he came out, he felt that his body was stained with an unpleasant smell. "Thank you." Seeing Su Ku, Qin Gong shed tears of gratitude and immediately dispelled his suspicions. He only felt that Feng Yi was stubborn but kind inside. She was quite likable. Feng Yi nodded from afar. The conversation that followed was confidential. It was not suitable for him to listen in. Su Ku asked Qin Gong, "Who is your lord?" Facing Su Ku, Qin Gong did not hide anything. "My lord, Su Fei, specially sent Qin Gong to deliver a secret letter to the magistrate of Liuzhou." It was actually Su Fei's man? Su Ku was in a trance for a moment. He suddenly remembered what Jiang Pingji had said a while ago. Su Fei's messenger would arrive in Wanzhou in a few days and he was told to be careful. Presumably, the messenger that the Lord mentioned was this person in front of him? Where is the secret letter? Chapter 11:10. Qin Gong was a stubborn man. Su Fei instructed him to hand it over to Jiang Pingji personally, so he refused to hand it over to anyone else. Su Ku looked at Qin Gong with a smile. He vaguely understood why Feng Yi was teasing Qin Gong. The people under the Lord's tent, from the civil officials to the military generals, were basically white and black. Now that there was someone who was the purest and most pure, wasn't that something new? In that case, Ku will write a letter to inform the Lord of this matter. Qin Gong shook his head and declined. "This matter is of utmost importance and cannot be delayed. Registrar Su, why don't you arrange some people so that I can personally deliver the letter?" With that, Qin Gong's eyes revealed a pleading look. It would be a waste of time for Su Ku to write to Jiang Pingji. Qin Gong recalled the smell of blood that day and the white cloth wrapped around Su Fei's hand. He vaguely guessed that the secret letter in his bosom was most likely a letter written in blood. If it wasn't an important matter, who would mutilate themselves and bleed to write a letter of blood? Su Ku thought about it and agreed to Qin Gong's suggestion. "If that's the case, I'll send someone to escort the messenger." Qin Gong was flattered that Su Ku was so easy to talk to. He thought that he would be rejected by Su Ku before he could see Jiang Pingji. He said gratefully, "Thank you, Registrar Su." As an omnipotent butler, Su Ku was naturally capable. In the time it took Qin Gong to drink half a pot of tea, he had already prepared everything. Attendants, horses, carriages, food, and even a set of formal attire for meeting Jiang Pingji had been prepared. Qin Gong expressed his gratitude again, but he did not notice that Su Ku was looking at him with pity and sympathy. "What a pity, he's an abandoned pawn." Su Ku looked in the direction where the carriages had left and let out a sigh that was carried away by the wind. Abandoned? How did that person become an abandoned pawn? Feng Yi was waiting outside when he heard that Qin Gong had left. He went out to take a look and happened to hear Su Ku's sigh. Su Ku came back to his senses and looked down to meet Feng Yi's puzzled gaze. If there were no accidents, Feng Yi would basically be the next generation's leader and the future young master's most reliable right-hand man. No matter if it was Su Ku or the others, they all had high hopes for Feng Yi and often gave her guidance. "I heard that Su Fei is in dire straits recently. The generals under his command have been killed one after another, and his territories have been lost one after another. Now he is imprisoned and his fate is about to run out." Although Qin Gong was young, he already had the demeanor of a general. What was more commendable was that he was loyal to Su Fei. "Although I haven't seen the surface of such a character, I've seen a bit of it." Su Ku chuckled and carefully guided Feng Yi. "Tell me, is it more important to deliver the letter or your own life? Dispatching a general as a messenger and neglecting his own guards, what is Su Fei planning?" There was no need for a general to personally deliver a letter. After Feng Yi heard this, it was as if she was suddenly enlightened. A look of realization appeared on her sickly face. "Registrar Su, you mean to say that Qin Gong isn't just an abandoned pawn, but a gift from Su Fei to the prefecture overseer?" Su Ku sneered. "Rather than a gift, it's more like a bargaining chip." Feng Yi's heart turned cold and she was momentarily speechless. Putting himself in her shoes, if he was used as a bargaining chip by the person he was loyal to and sent to the opponent's side, how disappointed would he be? Su Ke saw Feng Yi deep in thought and smiled. This is just a speculation. Only the Lord knows the truth. Feng Yi shook her head. What Registrar Su said makes sense. It's mostly true. Although Su Ke stayed in the rear all year round and hardly fought with the army, no one dared to look down on him because of this. Whether it was the small Xiangyang district in the past or the huge territory now, Su Ke could manage them in an orderly manner. Without him to stabilize the rear, Jiang Pingji couldn't have led the army to attack the northern borderline and Sangzhou. Wars were fought fiercely, but it was still peaceful under her rule, as if it was a prosperous and peaceful era. Take a chestnut. Her father, who was such an unrestrained person, wouldn't take the initiative to provoke Su Ke. It was evident from this. Of course, Su Fei isn't a fool. He won't directly say that he's giving it to you. If he says that, Qin Gong won't truly pledge allegiance to the Lord. The Lord will also alienate Qin Gong. That won't be good. Su Ke smiled. There are still many ways to learn. Watch more, learn more, and think more. Feng Yi bowed and thanked him. Thank you, Uncle Su, for your guidance. Su Ke was speechless. You're so reserved and polite. You don't seem to be from Feng Zisher's family. You seem to be from Feng Huayu's family. Feng Yi smiled shyly. At that moment she finally looked like someone of her age. In the orange afterglow, Feng Yi didn't go home. Instead, she went to Feng Jin's house to check on Chongqing's homework. 1/3 of Chongqing's enlightenment was taught by Feng Jin, 1/3 by the Golden Scale Academy, and the remaining 1/3 by Feng Yi. However, the person Chongqing was most afraid of was Feng Yi. Feng Jin could act coquettishly, the headmaster of the academy could act cute, but Feng Yi could only do her best to accept her punishment. She nervously sat upright, her two plump hands clutching the fabric on her knees. Her round eyes stared at Feng Yi's eyes. If he raised his eyebrows, she would show a fearful expression. Her little heart was in her throat. Do you want to copy until the end of the year? After a while, Feng Yi put down the notebook. Chongqing's little heart was in her throat. You have to copy all the circled wrong words. One word 100 times. Feng Yi added, copy with the martial arts squat. Chongqing let out a howl. 18 wrong words in one essay. One word 100 times. She couldn't even eat dinner at the end of the month, let alone tonight's dinner. I'll copy with you. Is that okay? Feng Yi said, I'll copy as much as you copy. Chongqing saw that there was no room for negotiation. She could only accept her punishment. Careless and overconfident are conceited. Now that you feel that you're being punished to copy too much, why don't you check it again? Chongqing pouted her mouth and opened her watery eyes, not daring to refute. Seeing this, Feng Yi frowned slightly. This wasn't like the Chongqing he knew. As the previous generation started their own families, Feng Yi's generation slowly increased. However, he was the one who played with Chongqing the most and understood her the best. Did the servants in the mansion neglect you? No. If there is, just tell me. I'll help you get rid of them. If it doesn't work, find an excuse to stay at my house for a few days. Feng Yi's expression was calm. He steadily took a horse stance. His wrist was extremely steady. He lifted the brush and dropped it. His handwriting was as clear as his own. It already had a certain natural charm. You're the elder sister now. You should show the bearing and skill of an elder sister. People change. You can't stay the same all the time. They won't continue to indulge you just because you're young, because your second brother is younger than you. Before Feng Jin was dragged to Sangzhou by Jiang Pingji, Wei Jingxian successfully had a second child. After Sangzhou ended, the second child was born. Feng Jin and Wei Jingxian were not people who valued sons over daughters. However, their youngest son was young, so they had to spend more energy to take care of him. With Chongqing's sensitive personality, it was impossible for her not to notice the difference. I didn't. Chongqing pouted. She was just annoyed by the servant's private chatter. Since you didn't, then you should learn well. Out of the corner of his eye, Feng Yi saw that she had written another wrong word. His eyebrows twitched and he said seriously, Your father and mother are busy. The situation outside is not peaceful. They probably won't be able to take care of your second brother's enlightenment in the future. In the end, won't they still have to rely on you? But with your ability to enlighten others, it's good enough that you haven't led them astray. Young brother Feng, then in the future, when you have a younger brother, you teach him well and raise him into a talent. Don't let father harm him. Chongqing was speechless. Chapter 11:11. Young brother Feng is indeed a good brother. After Feng Yi's explanation, Chongqing's gloomy mood eased a lot. Sure enough, those talkative maidservants still needed to be taught a lesson. Don't always talk about trivial things. As she thought of this, she suddenly remembered a servant girl's idle chatter. That servant girl had been bought into the manor for half a year and was now 13 years old. Some maidservants thought that Chongqing was young, so they would take advantage of her nap and talk about some private topics. At first they only talked about young talents. After 2 years they would occasionally mention Feng Yi, who often visited. If I can get young Lang Junfeng's favor, I might be able to get a title in the future. Come on, title. You can't even be a Tong Feng. Why can't I be? Young Lang Junfeng doesn't have a legal mother to teach him, so he doesn't know anything. If I can get first place. Little girl, you can daydream. Chongqing was absent-minded and accidentally made a mistake. Chongqing, what are you thinking about? Chongqing came back to her senses and said with a smile, I'm thinking about young brother Feng's Tong Feng. Feng Yi's hand tightened and the tip of the pen dropped a lot of ink on the paper. His expression became very serious. What Tong Feng? Where did you learn this from? Chongqing didn't know why, nor did she know why Feng Yi was angry. Feng Jin's backyard was very clean. He didn't even have a Tong Feng or a personal maidservant, let alone a Tong Feng. She didn't know what a Tong Feng was, but from the tone of the maidservants she guessed that it was something good. Bai Xing and the others said that they wanted to be young brother Feng's Tong Feng. Feng Yi put down the pen with a snap. The ink on the tip of the pen splashed, and the paper that was half written on was completely ruined. They're just a few lowly maidservants. Are they worthy of Xiao Feng? Feng Yi's weak face was filled with anger. Chongqing was frightened and couldn't help but shrink her neck. He saw that Chongqing was frightened, so he softened his expression. A Tong Feng is an anonymous lowly concubine. Chongqing understood the term lowly concubine because it was mentioned in books. She couldn't help but frown in confusion. It's so strange. Why would anyone want to be a lowly concubine? Feng Yi was unable to answer this question. However, he felt that the servants and maids around Chongqing needed to be cleaned up. It was one thing for them to be talkative, but they were actually talkative in front of Chongqing. Chongqing was still young and was at the age of vigorous learning. If her temperament was affected by their words, would they be able to bear the consequences? Feng Yi's aura was somewhat heavy. Chongqing did not dare to provoke him at all. In the next hour she concentrated on copying and barely managed to finish 2 pages. As soon as she finished copying, the servant informed her mother that she had returned from the government office. Feng Yi stopped writing, tidied up her appearance and went to see Wei Jingxian. She heaved a sigh of relief when the little devil who was in charge of Chongqing left. She plopped down on the mat and massaged her sore legs from squatting. The wind is the rain, Chongqing muttered. You were fine just now, why are you so angry all of a sudden? Just as Wei Jingxian was asking the housekeeper about the 2 children, the servant reported that Feng Yi had arrived. Let him in. Wei Jingxian smiled and asked Feng Yi for the purpose of her visit. She and her husband Feng Jin liked this junior very much, not only because he was precocious and well-behaved, but also because he treated Chongqing very well. He liked to play with Chongqing wherever he went, which greatly made up for the couple's negligence when they were busy with work. Feng Yi hesitated for a moment and suggested to Wei Jingxian in a low voice that she should clean up the maids and maids who served Chongqing. What did they do wrong? Wei Jingxian asked. Feng Yi explained the reason with slight embarrassment and added, Chongqing is still young and easily influenced by the outside world. Her temperament has changed. These days she has been absent-minded. I also suspect that these maids said something in front of her and caused Chongqing to misunderstand. He said it very vaguely, but Wei Jingxian heard the underlying meaning. She originally had a faint smile on her face, but now it was completely gloomy. Her right hand grabbed the armrest of the table and unconsciously tightened its grip. That night, Wei Jingxian boldly punished a few maids, and the commotion alarmed Feng Jin. She told Feng Jin about it and the latter was silent for a long time. What are you thinking about, husband? Wei Jingxian asked. I'm thinking about Chongqing. Feng Jin said, unknowingly the baby girl in the swaddling clothes is already so big. The thought of her getting engaged and married after she reaches the marriageable age makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm afraid that she will marry the wrong person, but I'm also afraid that she will not have a good life after she gets married and her husband's family will bully her. The corner of Wei Jingxian's mouth twitched and she could not help but remind Feng Jin. How old is Chongqing? She is still far from the marriageable age. It's not early. Feng Jin's face was gloomy. He had been avoiding thinking about this problem, but wasn't that deceiving himself and others? Instead of thinking about it after Chongqing reached the marriageable age, it was better to start picking now. Firstly, there was plenty of time, and secondly, he could be strict. If it was too late, the good seedlings would have been picked, and who would care about the rest of the ugly ones? Wei Jingxian was helpless and could only let Feng Jin be immersed in this meaningless dilemma. After a while, Feng Jin tried to ask, Jingxian, what do you think of Sun Lan from Sun Wen's family? She has a soft and humble temperament, which is not bad. The key was that their ages were similar to Chongqing. Chongqing had been spoiled by him to the point of being arrogant and willful. She was a good match for Sun Lan, who had a soft temperament. Sun Lan, she is good, but isn't she too soft? Wei Jingxian thought of Sun Lan's appearance. She was too shy, like a delicate flower that was kept by Sun Wen. He scratched his head and thought of another candidate. The eldest son of Cui Yu, the master of Chongzhou's Cui family, is also not bad. His background is a little poor, but he is easy to deal with. I saw him at the Golden Scale Academy a few days ago and he seems not bad. However, the style of the Cui family's merchants is too strong and I don't like it. Feng Jin racked his brains and named a few candidates. Most of them were famous gentry families within the borders of Dongqing. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that they were full of flaws. Wei Jingxian was annoyed by his words and said, no matter how good these juniors are, they are not as good as Feng Yi. Feng Jin's expression froze. But Feng Zisher's behavior. Feng Yi was publicly known to be good, but his father was publicly known to be unrestrained. Every family would have to think twice before marrying their daughter. Feng Jin could tolerate Feng Jin's unruly behavior because of work, but since the two families were in-laws, it was hard to say. Let me think carefully about this matter. According to Jiang Pingji's current family business, in the next few years, she would be conferred the title of Jiushi. It was a sure thing that she would become a king. As long as the next generation did not make any big mistakes, it would not be a problem to keep the family business. As the leader of the next generation, how could Feng Yi's status and prospects not be bad? According to his analysis of the Lord's thoughts, the Lord was determined to eliminate the old gentry families and promote the commoners. In this way, the shortcomings of Feng Yi's background would not be considered as shortcomings. In addition to his indulgence and care for Chongqing, he seemed to be a good candidate for a husband. After thinking for a night in a daze, Feng Jin became more and more conflicted. Wei Jingxian sighed helplessly. When it came to the matter of Chongqing, Feng Jin's IQ dropped sharply, hovering on the edge of passing. Nothing had been set in stone, but he was already worrying about what would happen in the future. Wei Jingxian got up to wash up and went to the government office to take attendance. She did not know that Feng Jin had done something. He felt that he could try Feng Longzi's words and let his son be his son-in-law. Feng Jin was speechless. Chapter 11-12. When he heard Feng Jin's hint, Feng Jin's first reaction was to look at the sun outside. Did the sun rise from the west today? Feng Jin actually wanted to be in-laws with him? Didn't this person hate his style the most? Feng Jin's heart was in turmoil, but he pretended to be flattered. If Feng Jin hadn't mentioned it to him, he would have forgotten that Feng Yi was 11 this year and the marriage was only 2 years away. He was busy fighting a war and there were no women in charge in the manor. No one could help Feng Yi find a wife. Feng Jin's initiative was exactly what he wanted. Feng Jin had no objections and even wanted to raise both his hands and feet in approval. Feng Jin was from the Feng family. Did he need to question the upbringing of the Feng family's women? He had seen Chongqing before. She was cute, lively, and well-mannered. He had wanted to steal her home and raise her as his daughter several times. No one knew a child better than a father. He knew that not every child could play well with Feng Yi, let alone raise her as a sister or daughter for a long time. Now that they had such a good relationship, they could treat each other respectfully when they grew up. It was better than a blind marriage. Feng Jin's quick answer made Feng Jin hesitant. A gentleman's word could not be taken back. He couldn't take back what he had said. But he didn't say anything definite. He only said that the two families had a good relationship and the two children could play well. If they liked each other when they grew up, it would be good for the two families to be in-laws. Of course, if the children were not suitable when they grew up, the two families would marry on their own. That day Feng Zhen was all smiles as if he had picked up a few hundred taels of gold. When he returned to the manor he accidentally saw Wan Xiu in the courtyard with a maid cleaning the cotton. He felt even better. The beauty was pleasing to the eye. His good mood seemed to be magnified, multiplying exponentially. But Feng Zhen knew to avoid it. He glanced at her and then went to the main hall without disturbing her. When Feng Yi came back from school, Feng Zhen guided him in his homework and said happily, "Father found you a marriage today." Feng Yi stopped writing and looked at Feng Zhen expressionlessly. After a while he asked, "Father drank again today?" "Just 2 glasses." Feng Zhen blurted it out. When he came back to his senses he said with slight embarrassment, "Do you think I'm such an unreliable person? How could you be booked out just because of a few glasses of wine? You're already 11, it's not too early to talk about marriage. The marriage I've arranged for you today will definitely be the best. There are too few daughters of important officials under Master's banner who are of the right age." Frowning, Feng Yi thought for a moment and asked, "Is it Uncle Qiguan's Jinghui?" Considering her temperament, family background, and age, Qiguan Rang's eldest daughter, Qiguan Jinghui, was the most suitable. "So you like the Qiguan family?" Feng Yi said mercilessly, "Uncle Qiguan's family background isn't high, and our family can be considered to be in decline. In terms of family background the difference isn't that great. In terms of age Jinghui is only 4 years younger than me. In terms of temperament, only Uncle Qiguan could tolerate father's wanton and unrestrained behavior. He had taken a liking to our family. If there really was a candidate the possibility of it being Jinghui was very high. Isn't it Jinghui? The Book of Rites says, those who are ignorant of etiquette will combine the good of 2 surnames to serve the ancestral temple and help the future generations." This was a very serious matter. Marriage also had to be considered in many aspects. Although Feng Yi was only 11 years old he didn't just think about liking or hating someone. Feng Zhen was speechless at his son's words. "It really isn't. Then who is it?" Feng Yi asked. "The little tail that follows behind you all day, the baby of the Feng Jin family," Feng Zhen said. Feng Zhen said, "Feng Jin and his wife are both beautiful. Chongqing, that lass, is also clever and cute. When she grows up she will definitely be a beauty. She has a good relationship with you after you get married. Do you have a token of exchange?" Feng Yi asked. "Not yet." Feng Yi continued with a cold expression, "If that's the case then it's just a verbal agreement. It may not be valid. Chongqing is indeed young, but you can't look down on her reputation because of this. As for the marriage, let's wait until it's confirmed before we talk about it. If we talk about it now it'll damage my reputation." Feng Zhen. Had he been taught a lesson by his own son? Feng Yi really didn't take this matter to heart. Chongqing was still young but this group of unruly adults were so busy. He really didn't know what they were after. Unknowingly Feng Jin and Feng Zhen felt like they had been shot in the knees. There were 2 sides to the conversation. Feng Zhen and his son argued with each other. On the other side Qin Gong, a young military officer, was also nervous and uneasy. The weather was hot and the mountain roads were dry. In addition there were several official roads that connected various places. It took him a short 3 days to reach the capital of Shangjing. After a round of reporting he finally received an invitation from Jiang Pingji to meet the rumored only female feudal lord, Lu Shi. Qin Gong didn't dare to raise his head to look directly at her. Instead he respectfully took out the tube bag that Su Fei had handed to him. Wei Xiai took the tube bag and passed it to Jiang Pingji. She violently tore open the string and took out the 2 secret letters inside. The audience in the streaming room was so bored that they wanted to scratch lice. They never expected an unfamiliar young man to appear in the streaming room. Naturally, Qin Gong's appearance was excellent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been proposed to by so many young ladies. Coincidentally, Qin Gong's appearance was that of a cheerful and energetic young man that many people liked. His first appearance stirred up 1,000 ripples. Fairy Queen's crimson. I'm crying out loud. Finally there's a new guy. He looks so clean. You woo, one's appearance comes from one's heart. His temperament is indeed clean as if he saw a small sun. He's different from those black-bellied people. Zhou Xian, little brother, are you married? Do you need a hostess? I can steal Li Xian's black card to support you. Gaime, tisk to the commenter above, I can sell everything I have to feed a handsome man, but don't steal my husband from me. Jiang Pingji was not in the mood to pay attention to those jokers. She knitted her brows and looked at the 2 letters of blood that were mixed with cinnabar and did not speak for a long time. Qin Gong's mood gradually sank with her indifference. After a while, Jiang Pingji put down the 2 letters. What's your name? Qin Gong sat upright and respectfully reported, I am Qin Gong, courtesy name Feng Jing. Jiang Pingji said, being courteous means being respectful. Obeisance means being obedient. Who gave you this name? Qin Gong looked at Lian Nen and reckoned that she wasn't even 20 yet. My deceased father gave it to me. Jiang Pingji was stunned for a moment. She frowned and handed one of the letters of blood to Qin Gong. Your lord wrote 2 letters of blood. One is for me and the other is for you. Take a look and give me an answer later. Qin Gong did not understand. His pure eyes were filled with confusion and doubt. Why did his lord give him letters of blood for no reason? Why didn't she give it to him in person? Instead, she asked him to send it to the magistrate of Liuzhou? Qin Gong picked up the letter of blood with doubts in his heart and slowly rolled up the bamboo slip. He read it word by word. His face, which had some color just now, immediately turned as white as a sheet. This. Chapter 11:13. The blood letter on the bamboo slip in his hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. It fell to the ground with a thud, making a dull sound. Half of his body on the ground, the young man's slightly thin shoulders trembled. The audience, who had been sucking up to the young man's good looks, was stunned. Did the streamer bully the young man? Yiwu Yanling, what's wrong with the young man? He doesn't look like he's smiling, he's clearly crying. Ye Jingjing, pull out the 40-meter-long sword. Who bullied the young man? The 85 troops in the streaming room won't forgive him. To me, streamer, can you ask the young man why he suddenly cried? Zizi Tuai, the poor thing is crying like that. His heart is broken. Some of the audience comforted him, while others looked for the reason for Qin Gong's sad crying. In ancient times, men were particular about bleeding but not crying. If they were not extremely sad, they would not cry in front of others, let alone a general. They would rather die standing than live kneeling. Crying was sometimes more shameful than living without purpose. Jiang Pingji stood at the door and looked out. She considerately left some space for Qin Gong and some dignity for him. Following the clues, the audience quickly focused their attention on the blood letter left by Su Fei for Qin Gong. Xingyuan, streamer, you've read the 2 blood letters. What's in the one you left for Qin Gong? Qin Gong was so sad after reading the blood letter that he could not control himself. Who would believe that it was not the blood letter? Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest and stood outside the elegant main hall of the provincial government. Wei Xiai followed a step behind her. Neither of them spoke. The audience was helpless. They could only work together to find the truth. For a moment, Sherlock Holmes, Idagawa Conan, Robin, and other detectives appeared one after another. The entire streaming room was filled with inferences that made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Some of the audience's inferences were very close to the truth, while others had wild imaginations. They were as funny as they could be. After a while, the young man's hoarse and suppressed voice came from the main hall. Magistrate of Liuzhou. Jiang Pingji returned and sat on the seat of honor. I was overwhelmed with emotions and couldn't control myself. I've embarrassed myself in front of Magistrate Liuzhou and Mr. Wei. Qin Gong had already wiped away the tears on his face, but there were still traces of tears on his cheeks. The tip of his nose and cheeks were dyed with an abnormal redness. His eyes were bloodshot and his temperament was pitiful. It made people's maternal instincts explode. They wanted to rush out of the screen and hug him in their arms to comfort him. Jiang Pingji was still expressionless. If she showed any sympathy or pity, it would be a heavy blow and humiliation to Qin Gong. Have you read your lord's letter? Qin Gong's body stiffened for a moment, and he could only squeeze out 3 words after a long while. Yes, I have. Jiang Pingji lowered her eyes and sighed. Do you know that he has no other choice? The enemy was strong while he was weak and there was nothing he could do to save himself. Thinking about the past, he felt that he had let down his father and brother. Now, I don't want to implicate you. Without your talent, I don't want the bloodline of the Qin family to end. Qin Gong broke down in an instant. Tears welled up in his eyes and refused to fall. He choked with a sobbing voice and said, I wish I could imitate my father and brothers and willingly fight until the last drop of blood for my lord. Although I am still young, I know the word loyalty and filial piety. Why would I abandon my lord in danger for my future life and bloodline? At the end of his sentence, Qin Gong's voice broke, and hot tears streamed down his cheeks. It was like a young beast crying blood, and it made people's hearts tighten. Jiang Pingji and him only had a few sentences in their conversation, but the audience had already imagined the entire plot. Yegür porridge, cutie, was he abandoned by his lord? Ingluo, it seems so. His lord knew that he was going to die, so he deliberately asked Cutie to send him away? Chinching gorilla. I bet on the streamer's integrity and shamelessness. This matter is definitely not that simple. You are loyal and he must know this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entrusted such an important task to you. Qin Gong burst into tears again. The last time he cried was when he was setting up a cenotaph for his father and brothers. After the bloody battle, not even their corpses were left. He was the only one left in the family to shoulder the burden. Jiang Pingji asked him to pass the remaining blood letter to Qin Gong. This was written by Su Fei for her, but Qin Gong was fine after reading it. Qin Gong endured the pain in his back as he opened the blood letter with trembling fingers. The image of his lord bending over the table and writing seemed to appear in his mind. Although he did not let it go, he stopped crying. After a while he bowed to Jiang Pingji. His tone was stiff and difficult. Forgive me for my rudeness. May Magistrate of Liuzhou, give me a night and give me an answer tomorrow. It's all right. Jiang Pingji was very tolerant. After Qin Gong left, Jiang Pingji said, although I have done many schemes in exchange for sincerity, this is the only time I feel guilty. Wei Xi smiled faintly. It's enough that my lord has a clear conscience. You feel guilty, but it's nothing more than Officer Qin's pureness. He can't bear to do it. Jiang Pingji said, this Su Fei is also considered an expert in psychological attacks. The first is to attack conspiracies, the second is to attack friends, the third is to attack soldiers, and the third is to attack cities. Psychological attacks are the top and attacking the city is the bottom. Psychological battles are the top and military battles are the bottom, Wei Xi replied. It's really embarrassing to say such things too clearly. Su Fei wants to be strong for a lifetime, so he has to leave some leeway and face for himself. If he doesn't do this, Qin Gong won't completely pledge allegiance to my lord, and Su Fei won't be able to get any benefits. In the blood letter that Su Fei left for Qin Gong, there was no mention of him selling Qin Gong to Jiang Pingji as a bargaining chip. Instead, every word was written with Qin Gong in mind. He recalled the friendship between him and Qin Gong's father several times, and then thought of Qin Gong's eldest and second brothers dying in battle for him. He could not bear to see the bloodline of the Qin family being destroyed. He saw that Qin Gong was extremely talented and had a promising future, so he thought of ways to find a way out for Qin Gong. The blood letter he wrote to Jiang Pingji was the same. Su Fei did not directly state his purpose. Instead, he recalled the situation of the alliance meeting at Huangshui, and imperceptibly shortened the distance between them. They were obviously only friends, but in his words they were very close. After recalling, he did not tearfully complain about how badly he was bullied by Su Bei. Instead, he talked about how good Qin Gong was. He hoped that Jiang Pingji would let bygones be bygones and put Qin Gong in an important position. He was a good seedling with good roots. If he was put in an important position, he would definitely make great contributions to Jiang Pingji. He was so certain that he thought highly of Qin Gong. He wrote it with such sincerity that Qin Gong naturally felt sad and touched. His lord always planned for him and considered for him, but he could not stay by his lord's side and shed his blood for her. How could he not cry? Only then did the audience realize what had happened. Their hearts felt heavy. When Mia Zhangxi, I originally wanted to be loyal to the ruler, but the ruler sent me away. Little brother, I feel wronged for you. Wei Xi saw that Jiang Pingji was deep in thought. He asked softly, is my lord thinking about Field Officer Qin? No, I'm thinking about you. Jiang Pingji said, if I end up in the same situation as Su Fei one day, I will kill you with my own hands. Chapter 11:14. In the ancient times, some people were so old-fashioned that they were detestable, Some were so innocent that people pitied them, and some were so stubborn that it made people sigh. After Jiang Pingji changed her attitude, she enjoyed everything more. Should you send someone to keep an eye on Qin Gong? Are you worried that he will take the opportunity to commit suicide? Jiang Pingji asked. Wei Xi nodded in affirmation and said, Don't worry, this fellow is not that weak. The most valuable quality he has is the word loyalty. After reading Su Fei's letter, he won't seek death. Wei Xi thought about it and suddenly felt that his suggestion was a little funny. Indeed, his suggestion just now was belittling Qin Gong. My lord is right, I was wrong. In the previous life, when Su Fei killed Su Bei, Wei Xi had yet to enter Jiang Pingji's camp. He was sacrificing his life for Enchui and Nanxing. However, he knew a little about Su Fei's situation. In the previous life, after Su Fei was killed by his cousin Su Bei, his general Qin Gong's whereabouts were unknown. His corpse was hard to find. Everyone thought he had died in the battle to break into the city. The truth was that Qin Gong had been shot by more than 20 arrows and had almost lost an arm. He climbed out of the pile of corpses with difficulty. He went to search for Su Fei's bloodline. Heaven rewarded those who persevered. He finally found Su Fei's eldest daughter in an abandoned well. Su Fei had 3 sons and 3 daughters. Apart from the eldest daughter, the others were born of a concubine. After the city was breached, the enemy troops rushed into the city like locusts. Su Fei's 3 sons and 3 daughters, as well as his wives and concubines, fled under the protection of the guards. Unfortunately, they encountered the ruffians and died after being humiliated. Only the eldest daughter took the opportunity to escape. She leaped into the dry well and luckily did not die. She endured for 2 days and 2 nights without food and water. Finally, Qin Gong arrived. Although the eldest daughter was alive, she had lost a leg and half of her face was ruined. Half of her face was as beautiful as a peach blossom, while the other half was as ugly as a ghost. Qin Gong rescued the bloodline of his former master and brought her to live in seclusion in a remote village to find a good opportunity for revenge. About half a year later, Su Bei was killed by the emperor. Qin Gong paid the price by swearing loyalty to Jiang Pingji in exchange for his former master's remains. He buried Su Fei's remains in the Su clan's territory. It was worth mentioning that Qin Gong married Su Fei's eldest daughter in the end. Although the woman was injured and could not bear children, Qin Gong did not take a concubine or take another wife. Instead, he adopted a son and changed his surname to Su. His loyalty to Su Fei was not the least bit fake. Because of this, Su Fei's actions in this lifetime made Wei Xi sigh even more. How pitiful was it to be wrongly entrusted with loyalty? Jiang Pingji's gaze fell on him. Then what is Zixiao thinking about? I'm thinking about my lord, Wei Xi said. A scholar will die for his bosom friend without regrets even if he dies 9 times. To be able to have such a master Cici is very fortunate. My only wish. All the regrets in his previous life had finally been fulfilled in this life. For no reason at all, the originally hungry audience let out a loud burp. The 2 of them were facing each other. Couldn't they just say whatever they wanted to say? Why were they thinking about each other? Xiao Pan, mercilessly kick over this bowl of sweet dog food. How dare you force it into the baby's mouth? Yilu Ling, the streamer and Beauty Ci have both changed. In the past, Beauty Ci was so cold and aloof. Now he is showing off to the dogs with the streamer. Wu Jiang, the entire street exudes the sour stench of love. Only the baby exudes the fragrance of a single dog. The bullet screen was full of ghostly wails and howls. Jokes of ridicule and blessings covered the huge screen tightly. Yusue Jueo. If the streamer and Beauty Ci's marriage doesn't be broadcasted live, everyone will climb the internet cable and hack them. Xinyu, wait for the streamer to cook Beauty Ci this bronze and iron frog? Are you getting? Xinjiao, wait for my grandson to tell me that the streamer I've been following for decades is finally going to hold a wedding? Indifferent face JPG. Jiang Pingji and Wei Xi teamed up to bully the single dog. On the other side, Qin Gong tossed and turned, unable to sleep. He was experiencing a war in his heart. On one hand, it was his loyalty to his lord. On the other hand, it was his lord's entrustment and ardent expectations for him. For a moment, the 2 thoughts were entangled and could not be separated. Under the torment, time passed like a year. When the sky turned white, Qin Gong appeared in front of Jiang Pingji with a pair of puffy eye bags and dark circles. Qin Gong, you've been thinking for the whole night. Have you made up your mind? Jiang Pingji was dressed in a plain shirt. She had no makeup on and her face was healthy. She looked more natural than usual. Even though Jiang Pingji was wearing a woman's shirt, Qin Gong could always feel an inexplicable deterrence from her when he saw her. This was a power that only someone who had been in a high position for a long time could have. Qin Gong's cheeks were pale and bloodless. As if he had experienced a difficult struggle, he suddenly bowed down and kowtowed. General Qin Gong greets the new lord. Jiang Pingji revealed an unsurprised smile. Qin Gong's choice was also within her expectations. Su Fei was done with his performance. It was her turn to appear next. Su Fei and I are allies. We were considered comrades in the past. Now that he's in prison and is in a precarious situation, I can't bear to see him. After Jiang Pingji finished speaking, Qin Gong's face gradually revealed a look of ecstasy. She acted as if she did not see it and continued. Su Fei wrote a book in blood. Every word he wrote was filled with blood. No one could not be moved. Considering our friendship in the past, I can't leave him in the lurch. Qin Gong, listen to my orders. Qin Gong gestured to accept the order. General Qin Gong, listen to your orders. Deploy 10,000 troops to Hu County immediately. Qin Gong was so happy that he was almost speechless. His hands that were cupped in a fist were trembling like a sieve. General, listen to my orders. In the end, Jiang Pingji sighed and added, Feng Jing, it's not that I don't want to deploy more troops. It's just that the battle at the northern borderline last year and the battle at Sangzhou this year have depleted too much. Now that the troops and horses are exhausted, there's not much left in the grain depot. Otherwise I would definitely. At this point Jiang Pingji paused. She frowned as if she was really in a difficult position. Qin Gong, who had finally calmed down, could not help but feel excited again. 10,000 troops and horses are enough. I thank my lord for your kindness. After Qin Gong retreated, Jiang Pingji saw that a bullet screen in the streaming room had become a hot topic. Herbivores Wuxia, the little cutie is no match for the two drama queens working together. Su Fei attacked Qin Gong's heart and Jiang Pingji fooled him. The two of them made a deal. Qin Gong did not even have a chance to fight back. My husband by Fei Fei, you gave him 10,000 troops and horses directly? The new general has to be tested, right? Although the audience sympathized with Qin Gong, they were all staunch streamers. Everything was based on Jiang Pingji's interests. Of course, Jiang Pingji would not be so straightforward. Although Qin Gong was the commander, Jiang Pingji had also sent people to him. Yang Si was the military advisor. Qing Yuan and the military supervisor were to assist Qin Gong. Yang Si, who had just been emptied, was speechless. There was no end to it, was there? In contrast, Qing Yuan was excited. He finally did not have to stay in the rear to deal with government affairs or help his father write books. As the son of Qing Yuan was born in a scholarly family, but he also had the heart to fight on the battlefield. Upon receiving the order, Qing brought his second son over for a good lesson. Qing Yuan had a lot of theoretical knowledge, but he had no actual combat experience. He had to follow Yang Si as his leader. He had to learn humbly and ask for guidance. In the face of his old father's earnest teachings, Qing Yuan naturally agreed. There's another point. Your eldest brother is currently working under Su Pei's camp. Chapter 11:15. Qing had two sons and a daughter. His eldest son was an official in another place. His youngest son, Qing Yuan, and his daughter had not settled down yet, so they were raised by his side. When the whole family fled Sui and County, Qing took his wife, youngest son, and youngest daughter with him. He didn't have to worry about his eldest son. The eldest son, Qing Sun, courtesy name Gong Luo. After Qing settled down at Jiang Pingji's place, he tried to write a letter to his eldest son, hoping that he could work under Jiang Pingji. Now that the world was in chaos, it was too dangerous to be alone. Qing felt that he was getting older and older. He was afraid that he would never have the chance to see his son again. Unfortunately, Qing Sun was a staunch supporter of the landed gentry and had always been disdainful of interacting with the commoners. Jiang Pingji's position between the gentry and the commoners was too obvious. She was born in the gentry but she supported the poor. It was a disgrace, so Qing Sun directly rejected Qing Cheng's suggestion. At that time, Qing felt that something bad was going to happen. After so many years, the youngest son was actually going to oppose the eldest son. When Qing thought of this matter, he felt deeply uneasy. He was not in the mood to work, and from time to time he would be absent-minded. Feng Ren, Yuanjing, and the others naturally noticed such a small change. Over the years, the few of them would gather together from time to time to discuss academics, to study and perfect the Golden Scale Academy's system and their teaching materials. Based on their friendship, it was reasonable for him to show some concern for his old friend. Master Yuanjing glanced at Qing's face and frowned slightly. He raised his hand and stroked his neatly trimmed beard. This face, he pondered for a while. Things were not looking good. On the other side, Feng Ren had already gotten some information from Qing. Knowing that he was worried about his eldest son and second son, Feng Ren was stunned. He was the most sensitive about this matter. They were thankful that their eldest son, Feng Gui, had taken on the responsibility of the clan leader, taking care of the clan, and had yet to become an official. If Feng Gui also stepped into the muddy waters, the three brothers would be a trio of thorns. Both the palm and the back of the hand were flesh and blood. If one of them was injured or died, even the father would mourn inconsolably. Feng Ren had no choice but to comfort him. Children and grandchildren have their own blessings. When Fu, don't take it too hard. It was a pity that the world was in chaos. Who knew how many times such a play would have to be performed? The children had all grown up and had their own choices and aspirations. The path of life was chosen by them. Whether it was the road to hell or the broad road, as parents they had no right to interfere. Qing looked haggard as he said, I also want to get over it, but I had a dream last night. My heart still palpitates and feels uncomfortable. Feng Ren asked him, what dream? Qing sighed and recalled carefully. Then he said heavily, I dreamed that I had returned to the old house in Suiyan County. The house had been in disrepair for many years and only the walls were left. Inside it was densely covered with spider webs and snakes and insects. Somehow Qing walked straight to his eldest son's old residence. Through the courtyard door he saw two long worms coiled around a fishnet table in the courtyard. They were both dying. Qing was not afraid at all. At this time a three-headed red-beaked black bird flew in from outside the house. It was about 12 feet long and its wings could cover the sky. It rushed towards one of the heads and pecked at it. Qing panicked and wanted to hit the strange bird with a wooden stick. At this time one of the long worms suddenly crashed into the wall. After saying that, he suppressed the palpitation in his heart. After that, Qing woke up in fright. Feng Ren was puzzled and turned to ask Master Yuanjing. I heard that you are proficient in the art of interpreting dreams. How do you interpret this dream? Qing also looked at him. Master Yuanjing thought for a while and asked Qing, are there any differences between the two worms? Qing said, they look very similar. If you want to point out the differences, one is longer and thicker while the other is shorter and thinner. Which one crashed into the wall? Qing carefully recalled, the thicker one. After crashing into the wall, you woke up from the dream? Did you see what happened to the long worm? Qing said, I don't know. After it crashed into the wall, half of its body was buried under the wall. I vaguely remember that the strange black bird seemed to want to peck it. After listening for a while, Master Yuanjing made a conclusion. Find a doctor to prescribe you 2 doses of calming decoctions. Qing was speechless. Perhaps Master Yuanjing's words worked, but Qing did not feel so bad. Seeing that he was not in good spirits, everyone tried their best to persuade him to stop what he was doing and go home to rest. Tang Yao, Master Yuanjing's student, had been holding it in for a long time. He was absent-minded for the entire afternoon. Tang Yao sent Master Yuanjing back to his mansion. Then he stuttered, Teacher. Master Yuanjing's face was calm. He asked calmly, what do you want to ask? Mr. Qing, that dream, it's very likely. I know, Master Yuanjing said, but can I tell Wen Fu? Tang Yao was silent for a while. He had only learned a little about the art of dream interpretation. He learned it from the master out of curiosity. Even he could see that the dream was strange. How could the master not know? He will definitely lose his son within a year, and it will be his eldest son. Looking at Wen Fu's face, the patterns on his son's palace are messy, and there is a fine broken line. The Hall of Tears is sunken and the color is slightly gray. All of these indicate that his son is in trouble. Also, his dream was that the bird ate the dragon and the snake and the master lost his son. In the dream he saw 2 long worms that were covered in scars in the courtyard. Not only was he not afraid, but he also stood up to protect the black bird when it tried to attack the long worm. It was obvious that he knew about it. With such a clear dream, it was no wonder that he felt uneasy. After that, the thick long worm hit the wall and died. I guess the eldest son didn't die in the hands of someone else. It was most likely suicide. Tang Yao was stunned. Can't it be avoided? Tang Yao had been in contact with Qing for many years. His respect for him was second only to Master Yuanjing and was on par with Feng Ren. Master Yuanjing said, Wen Fu's dream, rather than saying it was a sign of something, it was the most obscure worry in his heart. Tang Yao was speechless. Teacher, you mean, do you really think Wen Fu doesn't know anything? Master Yuanjing sighed. It's because he knows the situation that he had this dream. On the one hand, he knows the current situation, but on the other hand, he doesn't want to face reality. It's useless to say it. Do you think it can change? Tang Yao said, things that haven't happened can always be changed, right? Master Yuanjing smiled. However, this smile was very different from his usual kindness. There was a hint of sarcasm in it. The crux of the problem isn't whether it can be changed or not. It's whether the person involved can change, Master Yuanjing said. Qing Sun's temperament is destined to be different from the Lord. That year, Wen Fu wrote a letter to his family hoping that his eldest son would give up his official position and reunite with his family. Did Qing Sun agree? Do you think the Lord will accommodate Qing Sun, get close to the aristocrats, alienate and suppress the poor? Or will Qing Sun change his original ambition and suddenly get close to the poor? Tang Yao felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Master Yuanjing continued, it's because Wen Fu knows the standpoint and ambition of his two sons that the two long worms fought in his dream. In the end, both of them were defeated. Wuxia was powerful. Although Su Bei had the strength to fight, Qing was more inclined towards Lu Shi. Therefore, the one who was defeated in the dream and killed himself was the thicker worm. To put it bluntly, this dream was Wen Fu's inner judgment of the situation. Tang Yao was speechless for a while. He mumbled, no wonder, Master Yuanjing said, although the dream can be a sign, it's more like the other side of the human heart. So, it wasn't the dream that predicted that Master Qing would lose his son. Instead, it was his inner belief that he would lose his son. Chapter 11:16. Yang Si and Qing Yuan, one was a military advisor, the other was a military supervisor. The two of them were both assistants and monitors for Qin Gong. Qin Gong was well aware of this, but it did not hinder his gratitude and fondness for Jiang Pingji. 10,000 soldiers and horses and 10,000 elites with abundant rations and fodder would definitely be able to save his old master from danger. When Qin Gong met the two for the first time, they exchanged names and had a first impression of each other. Initial Qilin shape, this kid isn't bad. Yang Si probed Qin Gong with his words. His expression did not change, but he was secretly praising Su Fei's generosity. How could he bear to part with such a good seedling? Qin Gong was still young, but he had his own unique views and style when it came to arranging troops. There were many aspects that even made Yang Si's eyes light up. Yang Si felt that he was not looking at a person but a piece of unpolished jade which made people itch to look at it. Apart from that, Qin Gong had something else that was very valuable. Loyalty. Which lord wouldn't like a talented and loyal general? Not only did he like it, but he also had more opportunities to render meritorious service than ordinary people. Qing Yuan didn't feel that deeply, but he was also very sure of Qin Gong. He is indeed a good seedling. No wonder the Lord is willing to trust him. A general who had just defected dared to allocate 10,000 soldiers and sufficient provisions. If this wasn't love and trust, what else could it be? After marching for a few days, Qing Yuan liked Qin Gong even more. He was strict with the army but not harsh. He listened to suggestions and had his own opinions. Most importantly, Qin Gong was neither conceited nor arrogant. He would not act smart either. Which army supervisor would not like such a commander? Yang Si was also very worry-free. He had worked together with Dian Yan, this honest and straightforward man, for many years. His patience had been honed and he was no longer the same as before. Now that it was Qin Gong, he couldn't be happier. Qin Gong sent Jiang Pingji off and set off alone. He could hide from the eyes of Su Pei's scouts by taking a secluded path, but Jiang Pingji had ordered him to deploy 10,000 troops to support Hu County. It would be extremely difficult to conceal the whereabouts of the 10,000 troops. Moreover, ever since Jiang Pingji ended the Tsang Prefecture campaign, Su Bei's nerves had been stretched taut. According to Han Yu's analysis, after Jiang Pingji wiped out Songzhou, her next target would be either Huang Song or him. Now that Huang Song and Jiang Pingji had peacefully settled their dispute, they probably wouldn't fight in the near future. Without a doubt, Su Bei would most likely become her next opponent. Su Bei maintained a high level of vigilance throughout. Any sign of Jiang Pingji's troop movements would attract his attention. A few days after Qin Gong's army departed, Su Bei received an urgent secret letter. Lu Lanting just won't stop for a second. Su Bei muttered in a low voice. From his tone, it was unclear whether he was gritting his teeth or heaving a sigh of relief. It was probably the latter. After all, he couldn't stand being tense for a long time. Now that the dust had settled, he felt relieved. "My lord, is there any movement from Lu Shi?" Hearing Su Bei's mumbling, Qing Sun, who was seated below, asked. Su Bei replied, "According to the secret letter, the reason Lu Shi sent 10,000 soldiers south was most likely because of me." The small feudal vassals in the south of Dongqing had almost been divided up by him and Huang Song. Now only he and Huang Song were left. If he wasn't going to hit Huang Song, then he was definitely going to hit him. Qing Sun asked again, "Who is the commander?" Su Bei replied, "The scouts reported that the commander is a very young general." Qing Sun frowned. The names of the generals under Jiang Pingji's banner had been made public. The only young general seemed to be Li Yun, right? Could it be Li Yun? Li Hanmei? Su Bei denied. "No, the commander's flag has the word Qin written on it." "Say, when did Lanting have a young general with the surname Qin?" Qing Sun replied, "He's probably newly recruited. Since Lu Shi dares to let an unknown young general lead 10,000 men as the vanguard, he can't be underestimated." Due to their trust in Jiang Pingji, the outside world had a higher opinion of Qin Gong. "I think so too. Lanting's judgment can be trusted." He thought of his right-hand man. Right, has Wen been returned yet? He had been relying on Han Yu more and more over the years, but because of his pride he didn't want to place all his chips on Han Yu. In order to keep him in check, Su Bei had promoted many virtuous and respectable scholars who had sought refuge with him. If Wei Xi was here, he would know that Su Bei's entourage was rather luxurious, but most of them were supporters of the aristocratic families. Although the commoners wouldn't be discriminated against or neglected by Su Bei, they weren't very useful. They were basically left on the cold bench. Qing Sun replied, "Military advisor Han is still handling matters in Zhe County. I estimate it will take another half a month or so." Su Bei frowned after hearing this. He was too reliant on Han Yu. No matter what happened, as long as Han Yu analyzed it carefully, he would be able to clearly understand the inner workings of the situation. It was as if he had taken a tranquilizer. Now that Han Yu wasn't by his side, it would be difficult to find someone to discuss with. Fortunately, these 10,000 men were only the vanguard. Most of them were mainly probing. If they were to fight, it would be a feint. Su Bei wasn't worried that they would be stupid enough to use 10,000 men to fight him head-on. Su Bei said, "If that's the case, we'll discuss this matter when Wenbin returns." Su Bei then found an excuse to leave. Qing Sun sent him off respectfully. When Su Bei was out of sight, Qing Sun left the meeting hall. Although it seemed calm on the surface, a turbulent undercurrent was brewing. "Master, why did you come back so early today?" When he returned to the mansion, his wife came forward with a maidservant. She took the cloak he had taken off and asked him in a soft and gentle voice. Qing Sun replied, "I came back first since there was nothing to do in the meeting hall." His wife was startled. She had shared a bed with Qing Sun for almost 10 years. She had completely mastered the ability to read people's minds by looking at their faces. Although Qing Sun didn't seem to be affected on the surface, he must have been suppressing his anger. Could it be that his colleagues had made things difficult for him in the meeting hall? "Don't overthink it. Your husband is fine." Qing Sun turned around and went to the study. He returned his dinner without even touching a single chopstick. Of course he was fine. Su Bei had summoned him today and mentioned the secret letter. It was obvious that he wanted to discuss this matter with him, but he changed his mind at the last minute. His lord's attitude was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. As an official, he couldn't possibly resent his lord. Instead, he felt that Han Yu was disgusting. After suppressing it for an entire night, he finally managed to endure this matter. Who knew that the next day, Su Bei would summon all the officials to the meeting hall? It turned out that he had received another secret letter. Today's secret letter was obtained by the scouts after they had gone deep into the investigation. They hurriedly sent it over again. Qingsun listened attentively for a long time. There were 3 main points in the second secret letter. First, the commander-in-chief's surname was Qin Gong. He was young and probably hadn't been crowned yet. Second, this time the military counselor was an old acquaintance, Xianxia. They had been drinking together a few months ago, but now they were going to turn against each other. Third, this army of more than 10,000 was heading straight for Shanghai County instead of Zhou County. The first and second points were understandable, but the third point was used as the main point. It seemed somewhat unworthy of the name. If one knew that Qin Gong was originally the son of a general under Su Fei's command, then it would be easier to understand. One of the strategists said, "I heard that the bloodline of the Qin family is extremely loyal. Why would they seek refuge with the second master at this time?" The Qin family was considered a vassal of the Su family. Their ancestors had been loyal to the Su family since then. For more than 300 years, there hadn't been a single case of rebellion.